The morning arrived softly over Pallet Town, carrying with it the pale gold of the rising sun and the tender hush of the sea. The horizon glowed with faint amber light as waves brushed the quiet shoreline, leaving patterns of foam that shimmered and disappeared like passing dreams. In that stillness, the world seemed both ancient and new, breathing in the promise of another journey waiting to begin. Pallet Town rested at the edge of everything, a humble collection of rooftops and dirt paths, half lulled by the ocean breeze, half stirred by the call of adventure that lingered just beyond the hills. The air held the fragrance of dew and sea salt, mixed with the faint scent of pine from the forest that bordered the western fields. In the far distance, the faint call of a pidgey echoed, joined soon by the distant cry of a sparrow. The world was waking up. Every morning here felt like a rebirth. The skies always carried a purity untouched by the noise of the cities. The people rose, early, living simple days in rhythm with the light. Some tended gardens, others mended fences or swept their porches, but everyone felt the unspoken hum that threaded through this land, the pulse of a world inhabited by creatures that mirrored nature's wonder and humanity's quiet yearning for connection. Along the dirt road that wound between small homes and fenced-in fields, the wind carried the rustle of leaves and the soft clatter of wooden signs swinging on their hinges. A lone figure stirred near the edge of town, where the last cottage overlooked the ocean. The figure moved slowly, stretching in the pale sunlight, as if savoring the weightlessness of the morning before the first decision of the day. For this was the home of a young trainer, still new to the long path that awaited beyond the forests, still innocent enough to believe that every step would lead to glory, yet wise enough to feel the deep mystery beneath each encounter. Inside the house, the air was warm and faintly perfumed with the scent of fresh tea. Maps lined one wall, old parchment sheets marked with routes and notes, some faded, others recent. The trainer had spent many evenings tracing them with fingertips, imagining the trails from Viridian Forest to Mount Moon, from Cerulean's Cascades to the peaks that touched the Indigo Plateau. Each mark carried a dream, each circle a destination, and yet the true journey had always been less about the lines drawn on paper and more about the quiet transformations that awaited within. Outside, the day expanded gently. The sea reflected the sky, pale blue deepening into silver, and flocks of windgulls soared low above the tide. Their cries blended with the whisper of the waves. The wind touched the tall grass near the outskirts of town, where wild Pokémon sometimes grazed or rested. A pair of Rattata darted through the underbrush, cautious yet playful. A Caterpie inched along a leaf, glistening with morning dew, but alive in every corner, pulsing with unseen energy, a balance that had existed long before any human had ever walked these paths. Every trainer began here, or in places like this, quiet towns where the heart could still listen to the voice of the world. The professor's lab stood on the hill, its white walls gleaming softly under the early light. Inside, generations of trainers had taken their first step, their hands trembling slightly as they received that first partner, that first sign of belonging. To choose a Pokémon was never just a practical decision. It was an unspoken bond, an invitation to learn patience, empathy, courage, and the art of trust. This morning would see another beginning. Somewhere in that small cottage, a backpack waited by the door, packed neatly with potions, food, and a single Pokéball that gleamed faintly in the dim light. The trainer inside the home stood by the window, looking out toward the lab on the hill. The ocean wind moved through the open shutters, carrying the sound of the waves and the scent of salt and promise. There was always a stillness before the first journey, a kind of sacred quiet where time slowed and the mind reached out to the unknown. Every trainer who had ever left Pallet Town had felt it, a pause between what was known and what would soon be discovered. In the fields below, the morning began to hum with life. Bellsprout leaned toward the sun, and Pidgey shook dew from their feathers. The forest edge shimmered with the faint light of awakening Pokémon, eyes blinking open, wings stretching, tails flickering like gentle flames. A small herd of oddish moved in clusters, their leaves trembling as they emerged from the shadows. Nature unfolded in harmony, and the air was filled with a music too subtle for words, the quiet pulse of coexistence. As the trainer stepped outside, the path stretched ahead in both directions. To the left, the familiar comfort of the sea. To the right, the dirt road, leading toward Route 1, and beyond that, Viridian City. The first true test. The trainer's gaze lingered on the distant trees that marked the edge of that route. There was fear, of course, but also something deeper. An instinctual pull toward discovery, toward growth. The pack felt light on their back, yet carried the weight of dreams. The Pokeball at their side felt warm, as though sensing the moment. Within it rested a companion, a small, bright soul chosen not for power, but for harmony. The beginning of every journey was not about conquest, but companionship. That truth was often forgotten. Yet here, in the quiet light of morning, it felt clear and ancient, like the whisper of the tide. The road ahead shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Tiny pebbles glowed pale gold underfoot. The first step came easily, though the heart felt the tremor of change. The sound of the sea faded behind, replaced by the rustle of tall grass and the rhythmic pulse of one's own footsteps. Every few meters, the cry of a wild Pokémon echoed from the brush, sometimes a chirp, sometimes a rustle. It was not a warning, but a greeting, as though the land itself welcomed the arrival of another who would walk its length. Route 1 unfolded in a mosaic of life. Butterfree drifted lazily among the flowers. A pair of Pidgeotto wheeled high in the clear sky, their feathers flashing in the light. Along the sides of the trail, the grass swayed gently, concealing small creatures that watched with curiosity. The trainer moved slowly, taking in each sound, each motion, feeling, for the first time, the living fabric of the world as something vast and tender. There was a peace in that early journey, a peace born not of stillness, but of belonging. The road asked for patience, not speed. It was not about reaching the next town or the next challenge, but about learning to walk in rhythm with everything around. Even the air seemed to breathe differently here, touched by both wildness and calm. As noon approached, the light softened, filtering through leaves that shimmered like glass. The shadows stretched and shifted, and the hum of insects filled the spaces between footsteps. The trainer paused beneath a tree, resting beside a shallow stream that wound its way through the grass. The water sparkled with sunlight, and small Magikarp flickered beneath the surface. Every ripple, every movement, seemed to carry the same message, that the world was alive and watching, waiting for those who slowed enough to see. Time passed gently. Hours slipped by, unnoticed. The first signs of Viridian appeared in the distance, rooftops hidden behind a wall of green. But before reaching them, the trainer lingered once more at the edge of the forest, gazing back toward Pallet Town, now a faint blur of color on the horizon. It was already becoming memory. The first chapter closing. Even as it began, there would be battles ahead, lessons learned through failure and perseverance, friendships that deepened through shared trial. Yet none of that belonged to this moment. This was the dawn, a single thread in a vast tapestry, fragile yet luminous. The sun hung high, its warmth wrapping around everything like a quiet blessing. The road curved gently ahead, leading onward through the golden grass. In that light, the trainer felt the stillness of purpose, not the rush of ambition, but the calm certainty that every step taken with sincerity would reveal something sacred. The world of Kanto was immense, filled with forests and mountains, rivers and cities, legends and whispers. Yet every grand story began here, in the hush of morning, when a single heart chose to walk forward. And so the day faded into evening. The sky deepened to lavender, then indigo. A soft wind rose, carrying the scent of pine and faraway rain. The first stars appeared above the forest, glimmering like distant Pokeballs cast into the heavens. The trainer set camp beside the stream, where the water murmured through the stones and the world seemed to drift into dream. As the fire burned low, and night claimed the edges of the path, the forest came alive once more. Nocturnal Pokémon stirred, eyes glowing softly in the dark, wings beating in gentle rhythm. Somewhere far off, a hoot-hoot called, its cry echoing through the trees. The trainer lay beneath the stars, the Pokeball resting nearby, its surface glinting faintly in the firelight. The journey had just begun, yet already the world felt vast and full of meaning. Sleep came slowly, like a tide returning to shore, wrapping everything in silence. Above, the constellations shimmered, familiar, yet new, eternal, yet fleeting. And in that stillness, Kanto breathed, ancient and alive, dreaming its endless dream of harmony between all living things. The morning rose gently over Route 1, spreading a pale mist across the tall grass. The world seemed to hover between waking and dreaming, the horizon still wrapped in silver haze. The trainer stirred from sleep beside the fading embers of a campfire, the faint warmth clinging to the stones as dew gathered on the earth. The forest whispered softly around, the delicate sound of wings and the quiet crackle of leaves stirred by unseen movement. Kanto's dawns were unlike any other place. They did not rush forward, they unfolded, slowly, like a Pokémon opening its eyes for the first time. The mist drifted upward, carrying with it the scent of earth and the sweetness of berries. The faint cry of a Pidgey echoed through the distance, a reminder that life was already awake and moving. The trainer rose and gathered their pack. The ground beneath was cool, damp from the night's breath. The stream nearby continued its soft murmur, winding patiently through the landscape, glinting where sunlight began to pierce the fog. The Pokeball on the trainer's belt shimmered faintly in the growing light, a reminder of companionship, of the small presence that slept peacefully within. The path ahead curved gently northward, lined with clusters of flowers and patches of soft soil where tiny footprints marked the movements of wild Pokémon. As the trainer began to walk, the grass swayed lightly with each step, releasing faint scents of clover and rain. The sounds of morning formed a quiet rhythm, the distant hum of beedrill in the forest, the chirping chorus of unseen creatures greeting the sun. Every trainer who had ever walked this road had felt this moment, the crossing from the known into the unknown, where imagination gave way to the living texture of reality. The world of Kanto was no longer a story told by others, but a breathing landscape beneath one's feet. With each mile, the road changed character. Near Pallet, it had been open and bright, the grass wide and friendly. But now it grew more complex, the terrain rippling gently, the trees drawing closer, the shade deepening with mystery. Sometimes, the path narrowed to a thin trail pressed between bushes. Other times, it opened to clearings, where sunlight danced like liquid gold across the field. Wild Pokémon appeared and disappeared, glimpses of movement between leaves and grass. A small flock of Spearow swept across the sky, their wings catching the light. A Sentret balanced atop a stone, its tail flicking with cautious curiosity before vanishing into the brush. Each encounter was fleeting, yet felt timeless, the eternal dance between wanderer and world. The trainer paused to rest beneath a great oak, its roots curling into the ground like ancient veins. From the pack came a small fruit, freshly picked the day before, shared now with a companion within the Pokeball. A flash of light broke the air, soft, warm, and alive. And from that light emerged the trainer's partner. The small Pokémon stretched, blinking against the daylight, the fire of youth glimmering in its eyes. No words were exchanged. There was no need. The bond between them lived in silence, a language spoken through trust and shared rhythm. Together they sat beneath the tree, listening to the heartbeat of the land. The forest breathed around them, Wind rustled the canopy, scattering leaves in slow spirals. Somewhere in the distance, a rattata darted across the path, followed by the faint scurrying of its companions. The faint trickle of a hidden stream echoed faintly, harmonizing with the sighing of branches. After a time, they continued. The sun had climbed higher now, warming the air. The mist had lifted, revealing the full shape of the route. Rolling hills that folded gently toward Viridian City, glimpses of rooftops faintly visible beyond the tree line. But distance in Kanto was rarely measured in miles. It was measured in moments, in the quiet connections formed between trainer, Pokémon, and land. Each step carried the faint hum of growth, the subtle awareness that every journey was more than a crossing of space. It was an inward unfolding. The Kanto region had always been this way. More than geography, it was a reflection of the hearts that traveled through it. By midday, the path grew livelier. A small patch of tall grass shimmered with motion. The trainer paused, sensing the pulse of life within. The grass swayed, first once, then again. And suddenly, a wild Pokémon emerged. Its form was small, bright-eyed, cautious. It regarded the trainer quietly, uncertain whether to approach or flee. The trainer did not move. Stillness was often the bridge between fear and trust. Slowly, the wild creature relaxed, lowering its head slightly. Then, disappearing once more into the brush. Encounters like these were reminders that the world did not exist for conquest, but for connection. The strength of a true trainer was measured not only by victory, but by conquest, gentleness. As afternoon unfolded, the air shifted. A breeze from the north carried the faint scent of city stone and running water. The first sign that Viridian was near. The horizon glowed brighter, touched by the silver reflection of rooftops in sunlight. Yet, before the city, the road passed through one final stretch of wilderness, a forested corridor, alive with sound and light. The canopy arched overhead, filtering sunlight into dappled gold. The forest floor was rich with fallen leaves and scattered berries, and the hum of beedrill echoed distantly, deep and resonant, like the drone of summer. Here, the trainer walked with reverence. This place felt ancient, untouched by time, as though it remembered every traveler who had ever passed through. A patch of moss-covered stones marked a natural resting point beside a shallow pool. The water reflected the shifting branches above, broken only by the faint ripples of pollywag gliding beneath the surface. The trainer knelt, cupped their hands, and brought cool water to their face. The sensation was grounding, a quiet reminder of simplicity, of life sustained by small acts of awareness. The Pokémon companion drank as well, its reflection flickering beside the trainer's. They lingered there, letting time soften its edges, before moving once more toward the north. As the light began to shift toward evening, the first signs of civilization appeared. A fence, a dirt path more worn, and even a wooden sign bearing the familiar lettering, Viridian City, 1 mile. The letters were faded by weather, but the sight carried weight. Every trainer who reached this sign felt the quiet pride of progress, the subtle shift from wanderer to traveler. The final mile passed gently. The hum of the forest faded behind, replaced by the distant rhythm of a city, footsteps on cobblestone, voices carried by the wind, the faint metallic chime of machinery at the Pokémon Center. The smell of the sea gave way to the scent of smoke, bread, and oil. The trainer paused at the city's edge, standing before the small wooden bridge that crossed a stream leading into Viridian. The sun was low now, casting long shadows through the trees. Viridian City was not large, but it felt alive in every sense, a balance of nature and structure, of forest and stone. Houses clustered along gentle slopes, their rooftops catching the last rays of sunlight. The air carried the sound of water flowing from the city's fountain, mingling with the occasional cry of a Pidgeotto overhead. It was a place of beginnings and returns, a resting ground for travelers, a hub where paths crossed before they scattered once more into the wider world. The trainer crossed the bridge slowly, feeling the wood creak beneath their boots. The water below glowed gold in the fading light. Each step felt like both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one chapter and the silent opening of the next. Within the city, the lights began to bloom, soft and warm. The Pokémon Center stood near the square, its windows glowing like a hearth in the dusk. The trainer entered quietly, the cool air washing over skin and thought alike. Inside, everything hummed with calm precision, the steady pulse of machines, the gentle rhythm of healing. The scent of polished floors and herbs filled the air. The Pokéball was placed carefully on the counter. A soft light enveloped it, and within moments, the machine's hum deepened, then faded. Healing in this world was never merely mechanical. It was a ritual of renewal, a reflection of the same natural forces that shaped every creature's growth. Outside again, the sky deepened to violet. The first stars emerged over Viridian's rooftops. The city settled into a hush, its pulse slowing with the approach of night. The trainer found a quiet place near the fountain and sat, watching the reflection of starlight ripple across the water's surface. There was peace here, not the wild silence of patter, the road, but the calm of rest earned through movement. The mind drifted, tracing memories of the day. The path through the tall grass, the brief meeting with wild Pokémon, the forest light shifting through green leaves. Each moment now lived within, quietly shaping what would come next. Above, a Pidgeotto circled once more, wings cutting the twilight. The trainer's Pokémon, now restored, stood by their side, gazing upward with quiet awe. The two of them remained still for a long time, until the city lights softened to amber and the night deepened fully. Sleep, when it came, was gentle and dreamlike. The sound of flowing water merged with the memory of rustling leaves. The world felt seamless, a single breath, stretching from ocean to forest to city. Tomorrow would bring the first true test, the path toward Viridian Forest and the long road beyond. But tonight, the trainer rested within the calm heart of Kanto, where everything, light, sound, memory, and dream, merged into one slow, endless rhythm. The fountain whispered softly, and somewhere in the distance, the forest answered. The stars above pulsed like living embers, reflections of the countless lives that journeyed beneath them. And in that vast stillness, the trainer and their companion drifted into sleep, their spirits bound to the ancient, gentle heartbeat of the land. The morning in Viridian was cool and hushed, wrapped in the pale silver light of early dawn. A faint mist drifted along the cobbled streets, gathering around lampposts and the edges of rooftops like the remnants of forgotten dreams. The fountain in the city square rippled faintly, its sound blending with the distant cries of early rising Pidgey and the low murmur of wind moving through the trees that bordered the city's northern gate. The trainer rose before the first rays of sunlight touched the skyline. The Pokémon Center was still half asleep, its lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. The air smelled faintly of herbs and polished stone, the scent of quiet care. Outside, the world waited, calm, patient, infinite. The road north beckoned, leading into the vastness of Viridian Forest, where countless journeys had tested their first courage and quiet endurance. Leaving the city behind, the path narrowed once more to a dirt trail, flanked by clusters of tall trees that whispered softly in the wind. The deeper the trainer went, the more the sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the pure pulse of the wild. The hum of insects, the distant cry of unseen creatures, and the occasional rustle of movement in the undergrowth, each sound blended into the living rhythm of the forest's breath. The air was different here. It carried the scent of moss and earth, of dew and bark, and life, hidden beneath layers of green. Light filtered through the canopy in thin shafts, shimmering where it touched the mist. Every droplet seemed to hold a secret. Every shadow seemed to move with unseen life. The Pokémon within the trainer's Pokéball stirred faintly, sensing the change. There was a different kind of energy here. Not the open, playful wildness of Route 1, but something older, slower, deeper. The forest was ancient. It had watched generations of travelers pass through, had seen beginnings and endings, triumphs and hesitations. It held the quiet wisdom of all those who had walked beneath its branches. As the trainer stepped deeper into the trees, the light grew dimmer, the air cooler. The path wound and twisted, narrowing at times to little more than a space between roots. Leaves brushed against the arms, and droplets of dew slid silently from branches overhead. The forest seemed to close around, yet never in hostility. It was not a maze meant to trap, but a living labyrinth meant to teach patience. In the distance, a faint hum began to rise, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to pulse through the ground itself. The trainer paused, listening. From the shadows ahead, a faint flicker of yellow glimmered, followed by the soft rustle of wings. A swarm of beedrill moved through the air, their motion smooth and synchronized, like a single mind divided among many bodies. They drifted past the path, ignoring the traveler below. Their presence was not one of menace, but warning. This was their realm, their rhythm, their order. The trainer moved, slowly, deliberately, keeping to the edges of the path. The heart beat in calm rhythm with each step. The forest, in its immense quiet, asked for mindfulness, for respect, rather than conquest. Time lost its shape inside the forest. Minutes and hours blurred together into a seamless flow. Sometimes, the trainer would pause to observe. A cluster of metapod hanging silently from branches, their green shells glinting like smooth stones. A weedle inching carefully along the bark, its tiny horn shining faintly. A butterfree drifting through a shaft of sunlight, its wings scattering dust that shimmered like gold. Each creature moved in rhythm with the place, not disturbing its stillness, but becoming part of it. After a while, the trainer stopped beside a small clearing. Sunlight broke through the canopy here, spilling onto the ground like liquid amber. The air felt lighter, as though the forest had opened a single window to the sky. The trainer sat on a fallen log, setting the pack. Beside them, from the Pokéball came a brief pulse of light, and the companion Pokémon appeared once more, stretching in the sun. Its eyes reflected curiosity and calm. The quiet bond between trainer and Pokémon, deepening through shared stillness. Together, they rested, listening to the language of the forest. The rustling of leaves, the whisper of wind, the distant chirps of unseen creatures, all blending into a low, endless melody. No other travelers passed. Only the unseen eyes of the forest watched, curious but unthreatening. For a long time, the trainer sat there, neither moving nor speaking, simply existing in the pulse of the moment. There was no need for progress, no urge to hurry toward the city beyond. The journey was not a race. It was a meditation, a slow unfolding of awareness through movement. As the day stretched onward, the forest began to change. The light shifted from gold to green, then softened to gray as the afternoon clouds gathered above. A faint drizzle began, the kind that barely touched the skin yet perfumed the air with sweetness. Raindrops fell through the canopy in slow rhythm, tapping leaves and stones in a soothing cadence. The trainer raised their face toward it, letting the coolness settle across their skin. The Pokémon beside them shook lightly, droplets scattering like tiny stars. The rain did not last long. It passed as softly as it came, leaving behind a forest washed clean and glistening. The ground shone with moisture, and small puddles reflected the sky between branches. Out of these reflections, wild Pokémon began to stir again. Caterpie moving along wet leaves, Venonat blinking their luminous eyes, Oddish emerging shyly from the damp soil. In the distance, the forest grew darker, thicker. The path narrowed once more, winding upward through older trees with trunks wide as walls. The air there felt heavier, filled with the scent of age. Every footstep seemed to echo faintly. This part of the forest was known among travelers as the Heartwood, a place where sound behaved strangely, where echoes lingered longer than they should, and where one could almost feel the breath of the world itself. The trainer paused there, sensing the shift. The Pokémon companion stayed close, alert but calm. Together they moved forward into the dimness. Within the Heartwood, time seemed to fold upon itself. Each step brought the faint sensation of memory, as though others had walked here long ago and left their essence woven into the air. The sound of footsteps seemed to answer itself, a soft echo returning from nowhere. The forest whispered constantly, though no words could be made out. It was not language, but memory. The deep resonance of nature remembering every presence that had moved through it. At one point, the trainer came upon a clearing, where ancient stones rose from the moss like the remains of an old altar. No writing marked them, yet they felt sacred. A pool of water lay at their base, perfectly still, reflecting the canopy above in flawless detail. The reflection seemed deeper than it should have been, as if it held another world within. The trainer knelt beside it, feeling a quiet reverence. The Pokémon companion stepped forward, its reflection joining the trainer's in the still surface. For a moment there was silence so complete it felt like the entire forest had paused its breath. Then, from far above, a light broke through. A single beam piercing the canopy, striking the water's surface. Ripples spread outward, in perfect rings. The reflection wavered, and for a heartbeat, the trainer thought they saw something beyond. A faint shimmer of distant figures. Perhaps other travelers who had once stood here, or maybe only imagination shaped by stillness. When the light faded, the pool stilled once more. The moment passed, but its weight remained, a reminder that Kanto was a world layered with memory, that every step left traces in its endless story. The journey continued through the fading light. Eventually, the forest began to thin. The trees spaced wider apart, and faint light from the western horizon glowed through the branches. The air grew warmer, touched with the scent of open fields. The end of the forest was near. Before leaving, the trainer turned once more to look back. The forest stood vast and silent, its canopy darkening under the evening sky. It seemed alive in a way few could describe. A living memory, a guardian of balance. Every whisper of its leaves carried the same message: move gently and the world will guide you. Stepping into the open once more, the trainer and Pokémon emerged onto a quiet hill overlooking the plain beyond. The last rays of sunlight stretched across the land, painting it in gold and rose. In the far distance, the faint outline of Pewter City shimmered at the base of distant mountains, still many days away. Between here and there lay more roads, more lessons, more quiet revelations. The forest behind breathed one last sigh, a gust of wind that carried the scent of pine and rain, swirling around the travelers before fading into stillness. It felt like a farewell, but also a blessing. The trainer set up camp beneath the first open stars. The night grew cool, the air touched by the forest's lingering fragrance. The fire burned low, its reflection flickering in the Pokémon's eyes. Beyond the camp, the world stretched into mystery once more. Fields, mountains, skies untraveled. As sleep approached, the trainer felt the quiet certainty that the forest had changed them, not in ways easily named, but in the subtle depth of awareness, in the calm acceptance of the road ahead. The stars above shimmered faintly through drifting clouds, their light blending with the soft rhythm of the fire. Somewhere far behind, deep in the Heartwood, the forest murmured, a long, gentle sound, like the echo of a dream. And in that vast quiet, the journey continued, unbroken, timeless. Morning rose slowly across the open plains that spread between Viridian Forest and the stony ridges beyond. The air was thinner here, cooler, touched with the faint metallic scent of the mountains. The grass bowed gently under a light wind that carried the memory of pine and rain from the forest left behind. The trainer stood upon a low hill, gazing northward, where the peaks of Pewter's Range shimmered faintly under the pale sky. Between here and there stretched a long, winding road of dust and stone, a path that had tested countless travelers on their way to the first true trial of their journey. The sun had only just risen, and the land glowed in muted gold. Every blade of grass caught the light like a thread, and the horizon seemed endless. The Pokémon companion stirred beside the trainer, its eyes bright with quiet alertness. Together, they stood in stillness for a while, watching the world expand before them. The road ahead was not merely a route to a city. It was the first ascent into responsibility, the first threshold between innocence and experience. They began to walk. The path was narrow at first, bordered by low shrubs and scattered stones. As the morning deepened, the land rose gradually, the air growing thinner and cooler. Small Pokémon darted between the rocks, Sandshrew burrowing into soft patches of earth, Geodude resting like boulders until they blinked and shifted, startling in their stillness. Occasionally, a distant cry echoed from the cliffs above, the rough voice of a Spearow or the hollow call of a Zubat lost to daylight. Every sound here carried a different timbre than those of the forest. The tones were sharper, the silences deeper. The land spoke in slow, heavy language, the voice of stone and endurance. It reminded the traveler that growth was not always gentle. Sometimes it required the friction of struggle, the patience of perseverance. By midday, the path had steepened. The trainer paused often, resting beneath overhangs of rock or beside trickling streams that cut through the mountainside. The Pokémon companion remained near, its gaze following each motion of the sky, each shadow sliding across the cliffs. Together they shared small meals, berries, bread, and cool water from the streams, the simplicity of survival merging with the rhythm of the road. When the path leveled again, the trainer reached a ridge that overlooked the valley below. From here, Pewter City was visible for the first time, a place of stone and smoke, set at the foot of the mountains like a gray jewel. The city was quiet even from afar, its shape simple and deliberate. The rooftops glimmered faintly, and the air above shimmered with heat rising from the sun-baked stone. Beyond it, the mountains stretched upward, vast and unmoving, their shadows reaching across the land like ancient hands. The trainer stood for a while, feeling the weight of the moment. Every traveler who had reached this site had felt the same quiet tremor, the recognition that a new kind of challenge awaited. As the afternoon waned, the trainer descended the last slope into the valley. The scent of mineral dust thickened in the air, mingling with the dry fragrance of the rocky fields. The hum of civilization began to grow, the faint clang of metal, the low rumble of machinery, the distant chatter of voices carried by the wind. The road smoothed into cobblestone, and the first buildings appeared, low houses carved partly from the stone itself, their walls cool and gray. Pewter City was unlike Viridian or Pallet. It was a city born from the mountain rather than built upon it. Everything here carried the mark of endurance. Stone paths polished by generations of footsteps, walls patched with iron braces, gardens growing resiliently from cracks where soil had gathered. The air was filled with the quiet determination of those who worked with their hands, miners, sculptors, caretakers of the land. The trainer walked through the streets in calm wonder. The people moved with purpose, but without haste, their faces sun-worn and kind. Children played with small Pokémon, a pair of Geodude rolling like pebbles down a gentle slope, a Clefairy clapping softly as dust rose around them. Life here was slower, measured by the rhythm of effort and recovery. The Pokémon Center stood near the heart of the city, built partly into the mountain wall itself. Its entrance was framed by stone columns smoothed by wind and rain. Inside, the air was cool and faintly metallic. the hum of machines blending with the soft pulse of the earth. The trainer left the Pokeball for healing, resting quietly while the world continued its slow motion around them. Outside again, evening approached. The sky turned amber, then rose, then the deep violet of dusk. The mountains caught the last of the rand. Sunlight, their edges glowing as if lit from within. The city seemed to breathe more slowly as shadows lengthened. Lanterns began to glow in the streets, their light reflecting off the stone in small pools of gold. The trainer wandered toward the northern edge of town, where the mountain path rose toward the gym. There, built into the slope like a fortress of rock, stood the pewter gym, massive, simple, unadorned. Its walls blended with the mountain itself, as if it had grown there naturally. No banners, no ornaments, only stone, shadow, and silence. The doors were open, wide, and heavy. Inside, the air was cool and dim, carrying the faint scent of dust and iron. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hollow space, bouncing from wall to wall. Light streamed from narrow slits high above, illuminating clouds of drifting dust that shimmered like ash. The trainer paused near the entrance, feeling the weight of presence within this place. The gym was more than an arena. It was a ritual space, an echo chamber for determination. Those who entered came not merely to test strength, but to align their spirit with the patience of the mountains. The floor beneath was rough stone, carved unevenly, forcing each step to be deliberate. The silence was almost absolute, the kind that magnified every breath, every heartbeat. Somewhere deep within, movement stirred. The faint sound of rock shifting, a reminder of the leader who called this place home. The trainer approached the center of the chamber. Here, battles had been fought countless times, stories of victory and defeat lingering invisibly in the air. The Pokémon companion stood beside the trainer, gaze steady, small but unwavering. There were no crowds, no audience. The challenge of Pewter was an inward one. It was a conversation between the will of the traveler and the quiet endurance of the land itself. The stones did not move for haste. They only yielded to those who learned the slow strength of persistence. The air shimmered faintly. Dust shifted near the far end of the chamber, stirred by motion. The leader of Pewter, unseen, yet felt, moved through the shadows with the same steadiness as the mountain he guarded. The atmosphere thickened, not with hostility, but with weight. The weight of tradition, of countless trainers who had stood here before. And then, in silence, the battle began. It was not loud or violent. It was measured, patient, rhythmic. Each move carried intent, each motion an echo of thought. The Pokémon of Stone moved with deliberate power, their every strike echoing through the chamber like thunder beneath the earth. The trainer's companion countered not with force, but with grace, learning, adapting, enduring. Dust rose, light shifted, air trembled. The clash of energies was not chaos, but harmony. Two rhythms merging, testing each other's truth. The trainer moved with focus, the Pokémon with trust, both bound by the same calm determination. When it ended, silence fell again, deep and absolute. The air hung thick with stillness. The dust settled slowly through the light, drifting like snow. Both sides stood motionless for a time, acknowledging what had been exchanged. Not victory or defeat, but understanding. The leader's presence receded into the shadows, leaving behind only the quiet echo of approval that lingered without words. The mountain had accepted the traveler's intent. The challenge had not been to conquer, but to remain steady, to persist without losing calm. The trainer stepped outside. The sky had deepened fully into night. Stars burned above the mountain peaks, sharp and clear. The air was cool, almost cold, the scent of stone and cedar mingling with the faint trace of the city below. From the edge of the cliff, the trainer looked down at the glowing lights of Pewter, small, golden, like embers scattered across the valley. Each light represented a life, a rhythm, a quiet endurance. The world below. felt both distant and deeply connected. The Pokémon companion stood beside the trainer, silent and calm. Together they watched the constellations stretch across the sky. In one direction lay the forest now behind them, its unseen canopy whispering faintly through memory. In the other lay new lands, Mount Moon, Cerulean's rivers, and the long winding road to the plateau beyond. The first gym had been a threshold. Beyond it, the world would widen, challenges growing in both beauty and complexity. But for now, there was only stillness. The trainer knelt beside their companion, resting a hand upon its head. The warmth of the moment passed between them, a wordless affirmation of trust, of shared endurance. The mountains loomed high, ancient and silent. The stars reflected in their snowcaps. The night air pulsed with slow life, the rustle of nocturnal Pokémon, the hum of unseen wings, the distant drip of water from melting ice. Sleep came quietly that night as the trainer camped on the slope above Pewter. The fire burned low, and the stars wheeled silently overhead. The city below dimmed, the mountain remained unmoved, and the world breathed in long, patient rhythm. Dreams that night carried the sound of stone, slow, steady, enduring. In them, the trainer walked through the heart of the mountain, its walls glowing with faint light, its echoes stretching endlessly ahead. Each echo carried a message, soft and constant. Strength was not in the shout of victory, but in the whisper that continues even when no one hears. And as dawn approached once more, pale and silent, the mountain released its hold. The trainer awoke to the cool air of morning and the faint orange glow spreading across the peaks. The road to Mount Moon shimmered in the distance, a new horizon, waiting. With quiet calm, the trainer rose, packed their things, and turned toward the path ahead. The forest was memory. The mountain was lesson, and the journey was still only beginning. Dawn came slowly over the mountains north of Pewter, pale and cold. The light crept down the stony slopes in quiet rivers of gold, touching the jagged edges and the sparse grass that clung stubbornly to the rock. The trainer rose from sleep, feeling the chill of the air and the scent of mineral dust that lingered even in the morning breeze. The road behind was still visible in the distance, a faint line winding through the gray landscape toward the valley of Pewter, but ahead, only shadow waited. The path to Mount Moon began here, where the mountain's first ridges rose from the earth like the backs of ancient creatures frozen in time. The terrain shifted from soil to stone, from gentle inclines to sharp ledges and narrow trails that wound through gullies carved by rain and wind. The silence deepened. Only the sound of footsteps and the distant cry of wild Zubat echoed faintly across the cliffs. The trainer walked slowly, the pack resting heavy on the shoulders, the Pokémon companion moving alongside. Together they followed the trail upward, where the mountain loomed larger with every step. Its peaks were hidden by mist, its slopes etched with layers of light and shadow. There was something alive in its stillness, a pulse, a low vibration that could be felt more than heard, as though the mountain itself breathed in long, slow rhythm. By midday, the path reached the entrance of the cavern. It was a vast arch of stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The air that poured from within was cool and damp, smelling faintly of metal and moss. The trainer paused at the threshold, letting the eyes adjust to the dimness inside. The outside world felt distant already, its light soft and fading behind. Inside, Mount Moon was a world unto itself. The air shimmered faintly with dust that sparkled when touched by stray beams of sunlight filtering through cracks above. The walls glowed in muted shades of blue and gray, streaked with veins of quartz that caught and reflected light like trapped stars. The sound of dripping water echoed endlessly, blending with the distant flutter of wings. The first steps inside were slow. The ground was uneven, slick in places where water ran thinly over rock. The trainer's footsteps echoed softly, each sound stretching outward before fading into the hum of the cavern. The Pokémon companion walked close, its gaze alert, its movements careful. Here, life existed differently. The cavern's darkness was alive with small glimmers, eyes reflecting faint light, wings moving in silence. A colony of Zubat hung from the ceiling like shadows within shadows, their bodies stirring faintly as the travelers passed. From deeper tunnels came the faint scuttling of Paris, their mushrooms glowing dimly like embers in the dark. Geodude nested in the walls, indistinguishable from the stone, until they blinked or shifted slightly. The deeper the trainer walked, the more the air seemed to thicken. The light grew, scarce, replaced by the soft glow of the rocks themselves. Some crystals shone with pale radiance, illuminating the path ahead in faint blue. The sound of water became more constant, underground streams flowing unseen, their voices merging into a distant chorus. Mount Moon had always been more than a mountain. For generations it had been spoken of as a place of quiet mystery, where the stars themselves were said to fall to earth. Somewhere within these caverns lay fragments of that celestial descent. Moonstones. Born from the meeting of sky and stone, their light was said to guide certain Pokémon toward evolution, as if awakening something ancient within them. But to most who traveled through, they were less a treasure and more a reminder that even in the darkest places, light waited, patient, and eternal. Hours passed in slow rhythm. The trainer moved through tunnels that wound like arteries through the mountain. Sometimes they opened into wide chambers where the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Other times, they narrowed into passages barely wide enough to pass through. The air carried a constant hum, the vibration of unseen life, the whisper of flowing water, the steady beat of the mountain's heart. At one point, the trainer stopped in a small cavern where the floor was covered in shallow pools. The surface of the water was perfectly still, reflecting the faint glow of the quartz above. Every movement disturbed it into ripples that shimmered with color. The Pokémon companion knelt to drink, its reflection blurring and reforming in the light. The trainer watched in silence, feeling an odd calm, as though the world here existed outside of time. Deeper still, the air cooled further. The light from the crystals became brighter, almost ethereal. The walls seemed to breathe faintly, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of dripping water. It was in this stillness that the first moonstone appeared, a shard embedded in the wall, glowing with soft silver light. Its surface pulsed gently, like a living thing. The trainer stepped closer, feeling its radiance wash over the skin like moonlight made solid. The Pokémon companion looked up at it, transfixed. The air around the stone shimmered faintly, humming in tune with the slow heartbeat of the mountain. It was easy to believe, in that moment, that the stone truly had fallen from the heavens, that it carried with it the memory of stars, of ancient light that had traveled across endless distance to rest here in silence. For a time, they simply watched. There was no need to take, no urge to claim. The value of such a thing was not in possession, but in presence. To witness it was enough. The mountain gave its light freely to those who moved through with respect. The journey continued downward, where tunnels twisted into new forms. Sometimes the walls narrowed so closely that only one could pass at a time. Sometimes they opened into vast halls filled with columns of stone, their tops lost in darkness. In one such chamber, the floor glittered faintly with scattered crystals. The light danced like reflections of stars on the surface of still water. Here, the air grew strangely warm. The hum of life changed pitch, deepening into a low resonance that vibrated through the bones. The Pokémon companion stirred uneasily, ears twitching toward the shadows beyond. From the far end of the chamber came a sound, not harsh, but deliberate. A movement that carried weight. A shape emerged slowly from the darkness. It was a wild Pokémon, massive and silent. A creature of stone and endurance, its body coiled like the mountain itself. Its eyes glowed faintly with the same light as the crystals. The trainer did not move. The Pokemon companion stood firm, gaze steady. There was no hostility, only the slow recognition between two travelers of the same realm. The great creature shifted its weight, the sound of stone grinding softly against stone, then lowered its head, slightly, acknowledging presence. The trainer bowed in return. For a moment, time felt suspended, the air charged with mutual awareness, the silence deeper than speech. Then the creature withdrew into the shadows, vanishing as quietly as it had appeared. The mountain exhaled once more, and the chamber's light returned to its tranquil glow. The trainer continued onward. Hours passed in a blur of motion and stillness, of paths illuminated by the soft glow of crystals and others swallowed entirely by shadow. Fatigue set in gently, like the slow cooling of embers. The rhythm of footsteps became meditative, the body moving by instinct. While the mind drifted, the cavern's hum became part of the heartbeat. Eventually, a faint breeze began to move through the tunnels, subtle at first, then stronger. It carried the scent of pine and open air. The exit was near. The Pokemon companion lifted its head, sensing it too. The tunnel ahead began to widen, and the light grew warmer, turning from blue to gold. The final chamber opened suddenly, vast and luminous. Sunlight poured through a wide crack in the ceiling, cascading down like a waterfall of light. Dust sparkled in the air, and the sound of birds echoed faintly from somewhere above. The ground here was smooth and pale, and in the center stood a small pool, its surface glowing with reflected light. The trainer approached slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun after so long in the dark. The Pokemon companion followed, eyes wide. They stood together in the golden glow, the air alive with quiet radiance. It was here, at the heart of the mountain, that the name Cavern of Light found its truth. The mountain, so heavy and silent from the outside, held within it a chamber of pure illumination, a reminder that every depth, no matter how dark, contained its own sunrise. The trainer knelt beside the pool, dipping a hand into the cool water. The ripples spread outward, catching the sunlight, scattering it into tiny rainbows. The Pokemon companion leaned forward, drinking slowly, then looked up toward the sky visible through the break in the stone. Far above, a single Pidgey flew past the opening, a small silhouette against the bright sky. Its cry echoed faintly, a sound that seemed both near and infinite. When they finally emerged from the mountain, the world outside was vast and brilliant. The grass shimmered under the afternoon sun, and distant fields stretched toward the horizon. Behind them, Mount Moon stood silent, its slopes glowing faintly in the light. It looked less like a barrier now, and more like a guardian, ancient, patient, eternal. The trainer turned once to look back at its entrance, feeling a quiet gratitude. The mountain had not been conquered. It had been shared, its silence, its beauty, its lesson. Ahead lay the road to Cerulean, winding through green valleys and clear rivers. The air was warmer here, the scent of blooming flowers carried by the wind. The companion walked beside the trainer, steps light, eyes bright, with curiosity renewed. As they moved down the path, the sound of water grew louder, the first whisper of the rivers that define the northern lands. The memory of the cavern remained behind them, glowing faintly in thought, like a steady light carried within. The mountain faded slowly into distance, its shadow merging with the horizon. The journey pressed onward, each step another heartbeat in the endless rhythm of Kanto. Night would come again, and with it new mysteries, new lessons, new quiet revelations. But for now, the day stretched wide and golden, and the world felt vast and alive. The road curved eastward, toward the shining rivers of Cerulean. The air was soft, the wind steady, and the trainer walked on, guided not by urgency, but by the calm certainty that every path, every mountain, every silence led always toward light. Morning unfolded gently over the eastern valleys. The trainer and their companion had left the shadow of Mount Moon behind, descending into a world of softer light and greener hues. The earth here was fertile and damp, kissed by the constant breath of rivers that traced silver lines through the grasslands. The air carried the scent of water and wildflowers, and every gust of wind sounded like a whisper, as though the land itself spoke in the language of flow. For the first time in many days, the road did not rise or fall sharply. It meandered, winding lazily through open fields where clusters of bell sprouts swayed in rhythm with the breeze. Butterfree drifted through the sunlight, their wings scattering faint motes of color that shimmered as they rose. The trainer walked in silence, feeling the gentle rhythm of the day settle into the body. The Pokémon companion trotted ahead, light and watchful, its steps matching the calm pulse of the world around them. To the north, mountains faded into blue haze. To the east, the glimmer of water stretched like a mirror. Cerulean, the city of rivers and light, waiting quietly at the edge of the horizon. The journey had taken them through darkness, through stone and shadow, but now the world opened once more, welcoming them with warmth. The road crossed wooden bridges that creaked softly beneath the weight of each step. Beneath, clear streams flowed swiftly, their surfaces dappled with sunlight filtering through overhanging leaves. Small Pokémon played in the shallows, Poliwag chasing ripples, Magikarp leaping briefly into the air before vanishing again with a splash. The water's constant movement filled the silence with gentle music, steady and soothing. By midday, the trainer reached the outskirts of Cerulean. The air changed subtly, cooler, more fragrant, filled with mist from the many waterfalls that surrounded the city. Cerulean was unlike any place before it, built upon water, woven between rivers and lakes that shimmered with perpetual motion. The streets curved like streams themselves, and every bridge led to new reflections. The trainer paused on the first bridge, gazing down. Beneath the planks, the river glowed with shifting shades of blue and green. Goldeen darted gracefully through the light, their fins trailing behind them like silk. Along the banks, young trainers practiced quietly, their Pokémon splashing and spinning in arcs of silver spray. There was joy here, calm, unforced joy, the kind that belonged only to those who lived in rhythm with the water. The Pokémon Center stood near the heart of the city, its walls smooth and pale like river stone. The trainer entered, feeling the cool air embrace them after the warmth of the road. The sounds inside were soft, distant footsteps, the hum of machines, the faint rush of water running through unseen channels beneath the floor. Healing here seemed to happen not only to the body, but to the spirit. When the Pokémon companion was returned, its energy restored, the two stepped back into the daylight. The sun hung low over the rooftops, and the whole city shimmered with reflected light. Water trickled down stairways, pooled in small basins, and ran along the streets like veins of living glass. Even the winds seemed to flow differently here, curving gently around corners, carrying the scent of lilies and rain. They wandered through Cerulean's winding paths without hurry. Every bridge led to new sights. Children feeding horsey in the shallows, artisans shaping glass that caught the sun like droplets frozen in midair, and travelers resting beside fountains that sang quietly as water danced between carved stones. Eventually, their steps brought them to the river's edge, where the current widened and slowed. Across the surface stretched the reflection of a large circular structure, the Cerulean Gym. Built half above and half within the water, it seemed less a building and more a continuation of the river itself. Its domed roof glistened in the sunlight, and waves lapped softly against its foundation. The trainer watched for a while, hearing only the faint call of Wingull overhead and the continuous murmur of flowing water. This place, too, was a test, not of power, but of grace. The Gym of Cerulean was known not for brute strength, but for harmony between motion and stillness, between attack and surrender. As dusk began to fall, the trainer crossed the narrow bridge that led to the gym's entrance. Inside, the air was cool and filled with echoes. The sound of water dripping from unseen places resonated through the chamber, blending with the faint, rhythmic hum of distant waterfalls. The floor was lined with pools of water, their surfaces so still they mirrored the ceiling perfectly. Each step sent ripples outward, soft circles that distorted the reflections and then faded again. The Pokémon companion moved quietly beside the trainer, its eyes reflecting the dim blue light. Here, time seemed to move differently. Slower, measured in breaths rather than seconds. At the center of the chamber, the water deepened. Faint light shone from beneath the surface, revealing the outlines of aquatic Pokémon gliding silently through the depths. Starmie and Staryu, their core gems pulsing like beating hearts. The trainer knelt by the edge, watching them move. Their dance was effortless, guided by instinct, older than memory. It was then that the air shifted, a subtle change, like the deep breath before a wave breaks. A presence moved across the water, unseen but undeniable. The gym's leader was near, their calm energy spreading through the chamber like the reflection of light. The silence deepened into reverence. The battle that followed was quiet, graceful, and fluid. Not a contest of destruction, but a dialogue of motion. Every move flowed into the next, attacks rippling through the air like waves upon waves. Water surged, then settled. Light flashed, then dimmed. The trainer's commands were calm, measured, almost whispered, though no words were spoken aloud in this telling. The Pokémon companion moved with clarity, each action guided by intuition more than direction. It was not about striking harder, but about understanding the rhythm, the pull and release, the balance between persistence and patience. When at last the chamber grew still again, the air seemed to glow faintly, as if holding its breath. The ripples upon the pools stilled, and the light beneath the water steadied. The battle ended without triumph or defeat, only acknowledgement. Two spirits, meeting in mutual understanding. The leader's presence softened, fading back into stillness, and the sound of the waterfalls resumed their endless whisper. The trainer stood for a moment longer, feeling the cool mist against the skin. The Pokémon companion stepped closer, eyes bright with quiet awareness. Together, they left the gym, stepping out once more into the fading light of evening. Outside, Cerulean was bathed in gold. The rivers glowed with sunset, and the air was filled with the hum of life winding down. Fishermen drew in their lines, and the city's lamps began to flicker on, one by one, reflected perfectly upon the calm water. The world seemed doubled. Sky and earth joined through mirrored light. The trainer crossed one of the larger bridges, pausing halfway. From here, they could see the entire city stretched along the riverbanks, its homes, its gardens, its pools of light. Beyond it lay the road north, where mountains rose again in blue silhouette. Somewhere beyond those ridges waited new paths, new trials. But for now, there was peace. They sat on the bridge's edge, legs dangling above the water. The Pokémon companion rested beside them, watching ripples drift outward from where the breeze touched the surface. The sound of the current was steady, hypnotic. Beneath it, faint cries of nocturnal Pokémon began to emerge, soft voices, greeting the coming night. Stars appeared one by one above, their reflections flickering across the river like lanterns. The moon rose pale and clear, its light tracing the outlines of rooftops and waves. In that silver glow, the city of Cerulean seemed almost to dissolve, becoming pure light and water. Sleep that night came easily. The trainer made camp at the edge of the city, where the rivers met the fields. The air was cool and sweet, the grass damp with dew. The Pokémon companion curled nearby, its breathing steady and soft. The sound of the water became a lullaby, eternal, unending, as old as the world itself. Dreams drifted through like reflections, of stars falling upon water, of ancient stones glowing beneath the earth, of paths unending and skies infinite. In those dreams, the trainer moved without fear, guided by the same rhythm that pulsed through rivers and veins alike. When dawn returned, it came quietly, almost unnoticed. Mist rose from the rivers, veiling the city in silver. The sun climbed slowly, turning the fog to gold. The world awoke gently, as though afraid to disturb the peace of its own reflection. The trainer stood once more, gathering their pack. The Pokémon companions stretched, blinking at the new light. Ahead lay the path north, through the hills, toward the bridge, where trainers gathered, toward the long road that led to Vermilion, and beyond. They turned once to look back at Cerulean. The city shimmered in the morning haze, its rivers glowing softly, its towers like prisms of glass. The sound of water lingered, a whisper that seemed to speak directly to the heart. It said, "Move forward, but remember the calm. Flow onward, but never rush. Let every motion be like the river, constant, gentle, and sure." With slow, steady steps, they followed the path out of the valley. The rivers remained behind, but their song continued, carried by the wind, the quiet, endless murmur of water against stone, guiding them onward toward whatever horizon awaited next. And so, the journey flowed on. The morning light stretched wide across the plains north of Cerulean, pale and golden. Mist lifted slowly from the riverbanks, unveiling the narrow path that wound toward the long, distant bridge. The trainer walked quietly, the rhythm of footsteps blending with the soft hum of insects and the faraway murmur of water. The Pokémon companion moved at their side, its coat glistening faintly with dew, its eyes sharp with renewed energy after the peaceful days spent in Cerulean's calm. Ahead, the land opened into a broad valley. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and soon the trainer saw it. A vast wooden bridge spanning the river like a line drawn between horizons. It seemed endless, stretching far into the distance until it disappeared in a shimmer of morning light. Beneath it, the water flowed steadily, carrying the reflections of the sky upon its back. This was Nugget Bridge, the passage north, a place both simple and significant. For travelers, it was a route to new lands. For trainers, it was a rite of passage. Here, one did not merely cross the water. One tested resolve, patience, and quiet strength. The trainer paused at the bridge's beginning, resting a hand upon the railing. The wood was warm under the morning sun, worn smooth by the passage of countless others who had walked this same path. There was something sacred in that repetition, each footstep an echo of journeys past. They began to walk. The boards creaked softly beneath each step, the sound mingling with the endless whisper of the current below. Along the way, trainers waited, calm, poised, ready. They were not enemies, but milestones. Each one represented an encounter meant to shape, not to harm. A meeting of minds and hearts, tested in the quiet ritual of battle. The first stood near the edge of the bridge, eyes bright, posture straight. The meeting unfolded like a wave, calm approach, respectful nod, then the slow unfolding of movement and energy. The Pokémon moved across the bridge's length, their forms outlined by the reflection of sunlight upon water. The battle was swift, precise, filled with balance. When it ended, the air seemed lighter, the current stronger beneath. The trainer walked on, passing others, each battle a rhythm, each opponent a reflection of some inner challenge. Some battles were quiet and slow, marked by patience. Others carried flashes of motion, like sunlight breaking through ripples. Yet none felt hostile. Every exchange left behind not fatigue but understanding, the mutual acknowledgement that all who crossed this bridge sought the same horizon. Between battles, there was only wind and water. The breeze rose softly, carrying the scent of wildflowers from the far shore. The bridge swayed gently with the rhythm of the current below, creaking like a song half forgotten. The trainer paused often to watch the river, its endless movement reminding them of Cerulean's whispers, the lesson of flow, of gentle persistence. Midway, across, the valley opened wider. The river spread into a broad basin, dotted with clusters of reeds and small islands of stone. Pokémon moved freely here, Psyduck drifting aimlessly through the current, Oddish resting among damp grass, a lone Farfetch'd standing on a stone with its leek held like a staff. The sight brought a kind of peace, a reminder that even the smallest lives moved with purpose, each one part of the vast, unbroken rhythm of the region. As the sun climbed higher, the bridge's surface grew warm beneath the feet. The battles continued, each one adding a new layer to the unfolding journey. The Pokémon companion grew surer in its movements, its rhythm aligning with the trainer's, a bond strengthened not by victory, but by shared stillness. Between exertion, at the bridge's far end, one last figure waited, older, quieter, eyes reflecting the shimmer of the water. Their presence was calm, like the surface of a lake before dawn. The final meeting unfolded, slowly, not with intensity, but with the quiet inevitability of tide meeting shore. The Pokémon moved gracefully, each attack and counter a mirrored dance. The air shimmered with heat and light, the sound of the river growing louder as though responding to the motion above it. When the final ripple faded, silence returned. The leader's expression softened, a nod given not of defeat, but of recognition. The bridge, long and patient, had accepted yet another traveler. The water below continued its endless song, indifferent yet welcoming, carrying away the reflections of those who had crossed. The trainer stood still for a moment, breathing deeply. The wind shifted, cool and scented with pine. Ahead lay new terrain, the forested slopes of Route 25, where cliffs overlooked the sea and wild Pokémon roamed freely among the tall grass. The trainer turned briefly to look back. From this height, the entire bridge stretched behind them like a thread of gold, glinting under the midday sun. Each battle, each encounter, was now memory, soft, fading, yet alive in the heart. The path beyond the bridge narrowed again, winding through clusters of trees that whispered softly as the wind moved through their leaves. The river followed below, its voice constant and kind. The air grew saltier as the sound of waves began to join the chorus of wind and birdsong. Route 25 was quiet. Tall cliffs rose on one side, sheer and pale against the light. On the other, the sea stretched vast and blue, its surface broken by the glint of distant wing gulls circling lazily above. The trainer walked the path slowly, savoring the open air after the stillness of caves and cities. The Pokémon companion darted ahead, pausing to investigate the flutter of butterfree wings or the faint motion in the grass. They stopped once upon a high ledge, where the land curved outward. From here the sea spread endlessly, the horizon glowing faintly under the afternoon sun. The trainer sat upon a rock, the Pokémon beside them. Together they watched the tide shift and glitter, waves folding over one another in endless rhythm. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and wildflowers from the cliffs above, blending the languages of sea and earth. Somewhere beyond this place, it was said, lived a recluse, a man who spoke to Pokémon in silence, who had turned his back to the noise of the world to study the secrets of the sea. The thought lingered softly in the mind, not as a quest, but as curiosity. The path would lead there soon enough. For now, there was only the moment, the sound of waves, the slow hum of the breeze, the heartbeat of the journey continuing in measured rhythm. The trainer leaned back, eyes half closed, letting the warmth of the sun seep into the skin. The Pokémon companion rested beside them, its breathing slow and even. Time passed gently, unmarked. Clouds drifted across the sky, their shadows moving lazily over the water. Flashes of tentacool drifting near the surface, the the shadow of a lapras gliding far offshore, serene and vast. As the sun began to lower, the light turned amber, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and rose. The trainer rose quietly, brushing dust from their clothes, and resumed the walk along the path. The world was softer now, filled with the sound of evening. The final stretch of Route 25 was narrow, winding through grass that swayed knee-high. Small Pokémon appeared at the edges, Nidoran grazing, a Caterpie inching across a leaf, a pair of Pidgeotos circling high above. The air was cool, the sky turning violet. At last, they reached a point where the path ended at the sea, a small clearing overlooking the waves. A simple cabin stood there, half hidden by wild growth. Smoke rose faintly from its chimney, curling into the twilight air. The sea beyond stretched endless and calm, its horizon beginning to fade into night. The trainer stopped, feeling the soft earth beneath the feet, the cool salt breeze against the skin. There was a deep stillness here, a peace untouched by the noise of cities or the hum of machinery. The sound of the waves was steady, like breathing. They set down the pack and sat upon the grass, watching the sun sink slowly beneath the horizon. The Pokémon companion lay beside them, eyes half closed, its tail flicking idly. Together, they watched the light fade, the first stars appearing in the deepening sky. The world seemed to exhale as darkness settled. The water caught the reflection of the moon, stretching it into silver ribbons that rippled with each passing wave. In the distance, the faint call of a slowpoke echoed softly across the water, long, low, and oddly comforting. The trainer smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the day ease. The battles on the bridge, the wind, the journey, the endless motion of the road, all had led to this quiet place. Here, time felt suspended. The world balanced perfectly between day and night, land and sea. Sleep came easily again that night. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, their light shimmering on the water below. The air was cool, the earth soft, and the sea's voice unbroken. In dreams, the trainer stood once more upon the bridge, the water beneath reflecting not the sky, but memories of faces, of Pokémon, of paths taken and still unseen. Each reflection shimmered, then merged into the flow, carried onward to the horizon. When morning came, it was gentle, a gray dawn touched with rose. The waves whispered softly, the wind moved lightly through the grass, and the trainer woke with calm purpose. The road would turn south soon, toward Vermilion, where the air smelled of salt and steel, and ships whispered promises of distant places. But for now, as the light grew stronger and the sound of the sea deepened, there was no rush. The journey continued, as quiet and constant as the tide itself. The sun rose softly over the cliffs of Route 25, its first light turning the sea into molten gold. The sound of the waves below was slow, unhurried, like the deep breathing of something ancient. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint cry of distant wingle and the earthy scent of dew upon the grass. The trainer stirred from rest, the Pokémon companion waking beside them, stretching with a low yawn as dawn spread across the horizon. Before them, the world felt still, not empty, but poised. The small wooden cabin by the water stood in silence, half hidden by wildflowers and seagrass. Its windows caught the light and threw it back in gentle flashes. From within came no movement, no sound, save for the quiet rhythm of the waves meeting the shore. The trainer approached slowly, each step measured, each sound absorbed into the larger hush of morning. There was an unspoken reverence here. Something about the solitude of this place demanded quiet. They reached the cabin door and paused, feeling the salt wind brush against the skin. It carried the smell of the sea and of something else beneath it, the faint scent of electricity, like the air after lightning. Through the windows, the interior appeared cluttered, yet peaceful. Tables crowded with open books, machines humming faintly, coils of wire and half-finished devices scattered across the floor. It was not the chaos of neglect, but the order of constant curiosity. This was a place of thought and wonder, where the world was studied not through conquest, but through contemplation. The trainer stepped inside. The air was cool, faintly metallic, alive with a low vibration. Machines blinked quietly in corners, their lights pulsing in slow rhythm, as though breathing. On the desk nearest the window sat open notebooks filled with diagrams of DNA, sketches of Pokémon anatomy, and long sequences of handwritten notes in flowing, meticulous script. It was said that the man who lived here had once been a brilliant researcher, one of Kanto's greatest minds, drawn to solitude, not out of bitterness, but necessity. He sought to understand the nature of connection itself, what it meant for human and Pokémon lives to intertwine so completely. And in that search, he had distanced himself from the noise of the cities, from the contests and the applause, from all that distracted the spirit from truth. The trainer felt that presence even in his absence, a quiet intelligence that filled the space, as though every machine still carried the echo of his thoughts. The Pokémon companion moved softly through the room, nose twitching, eyes alert but calm. At the far end of the cabin, a large window opened to the sea. Beyond it, the water stretched endlessly, meeting the sky in a blur of pale blue. The wind passed gently through, stirring loose papers on the desk. Each page fluttered, their edges whispering softly, as if eager to be read. The trainer approached, resting a hand on the wooden frame. For a long while, they simply watched the horizon. The sea was not still. It never was. Yet its movement was so steady, so consistent, that it felt eternal. The waves rose and fell with perfect rhythm, and each motion seemed to speak in a language older than words. After a time, the trainer noticed something. A small metal device half buried beneath a stack of papers. It pulsed faintly, a slow glow, like the heartbeat of a living creature. When touched, it emitted a soft tone, high, delicate, fading quickly into silence. Then, through the quiet, a voice began to emerge. It was not a voice in the air, but one that seemed to come from within the mind itself, calm, reflective, filled with warmth and melancholy. It spoke not in sentences, but in impressions, in thoughts that unfolded like waves. The trainer felt images more than words. The loneliness of research, the beauty of discovery, the endless yearning to bridge the distance between beings who could not fully understand each other. It was the voice of the man by the sea, a recording perhaps, or something more mysterious, a resonance left behind. In his solitude, he had sought to merge human thought with Pokémon instinct, to find where one consciousness could meet another without fear or misunderstanding. The results were strange, sometimes tragic, but always sincere. The vision that came next was gentle, of a time when the man had stood upon this very cliff, watching the sea as the storm gathered. Lightning flashed, and from that brilliance had come revelation, that the link between human and Pokémon was not one of dominance or command, but of shared rhythm. Like the ocean and the wind, one could not exist in fullness without the other. The trainer closed their eyes, listening to the faint hum that lingered even after the message had faded. It was like hearing the echo of a dream, something half-remembered, comforting yet sorrowful. The Pokémon companion pressed closer, sensing the mood, its warmth, grounding the moment in quiet understanding. They remained in the cabin for a while longer, reading fragments of notes, sketches of unknown Pokémon, half-finished letters to colleagues in distant cities. Many of the pages were smudged, as though written in haste or in moments of sudden inspiration. Yet through all of it ran a single idea, that life itself was one great conversation, constant and cyclical, never fully completed. When the sun climbed higher, they stepped outside again. The light shimmered upon the sea, and the air had grown warmer. The cabin behind them stood silent once more, its windows glinting like eyes half closed in thought. The trainer looked back only once before turning toward the path. The road wound upward along the cliffs, narrow and rough, but the view expanded with every step. The sea spread vast and gleaming below, the coastline curving gracefully toward the horizon. The trainer paused often, breathing deeply, feeling the vastness press gently against the senses. At one bend in the path, they stopped again. Below, at the base of the cliff, small coves cut into the stone, their beaches hidden from view except for flashes of white sand where the sun touched them. The sound of waves striking rock echoed upward, deep, resonant, timeless. The trainer descended carefully to one such cove, following a faint trail worn by countless steps before. The air grew cooler again, thick with salt and mist. The ground was soft underfoot, littered with smooth stones and fragments of shell. The Pokémon companion darted ahead, exploring, leaving light prints in the sand that the tide quickly erased. At the edge of the water, the trainer stopped. The waves reached forward, brushing against boots, and receding again, as though testing the boundary between sea and land. In that endless exchange, there was something deeply soothing, a rhythm that silenced thought and replaced it with feeling. The sky overhead was vast, the light clear, endless. The sea's color shifted constantly, blue, green, silver, gray, reflecting every breath of wind. The trainer watched it for a long while, the Pokémon companion seated quietly beside them. The world here felt stripped of pretense, reduced to its simplest truths: air, water, light, and the steady pulse of life moving through all things. The trainer reached down, touching the surface of the water. It was cool, almost cold, but alive, filled with the memory of countless currents and storms. For a moment, it felt as though the sea itself remembered. Every journey, every creature that had crossed it, every story whispered by those who had stood upon its shore. A faint shadow moved beneath the waves, large and slow. The trainer watched as it passed. The smooth, unmistakable shape of a lapras gliding gracefully through the shallows. Its eyes met theirs briefly, calm and ancient. Then it turned, moving farther out to sea, until only its shell broke the surface, glinting like a small island of silver. The moment lingered long after the creature vanished. The trainer exhaled slowly, the sound blending with the wind. The Pokémon companion pressed close again, silent and warm. Together, they stood until the tide began to rise. As the day waned, they began the walk back toward the road. The sun descended in slow arcs, painting the cliffs in orange and red. The air cooled, the wind turned, and the distant cries of seabirds marked the arrival of evening. By the time they reached the top, the world was bathed in twilight. The cabin was a dark silhouette against the sea, the water below reflecting the first stars. The trainer lingered a moment longer, then turned inland, back toward the winding path that would lead away from the coast. Ahead lay the long road south, through forests and fields, toward the electric glow of Vermilion City, a place of ships, steel, and stormlight. But as the trainer took their first steps down the slope, they carried with them something quieter: the calm of the sea, the lesson of connection, the reminder that solitude need not mean separation. The waves below continued their endless rhythm, rising and falling like the breath of the world. The sound followed them as they walked, fading slowly, but never disappearing. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the man by the sea continued his silent work, his thoughts carried forever upon the wind and the water. The trainer did not look back again. The path stretched before them, dark yet full of promise, and the night embraced them gently as they walked on. The morning after leaving the cliffs dawned gray, and cool. Low clouds drifted across the sky, carrying the smell of the sea far inland. The path south was narrow at first, curling between patches of long grass and stunted trees that bent slightly under the wind. The sound of the ocean faded behind the trainer with every step, replaced by the hum of unseen wires and the distant cry of Pidgeotto gliding high above the hills. The trainer moved with unhurried purpose. The road now wound through open fields dotted with wildflowers, the earth rich and dark beneath each footstep. The Pokémon companion kept pace beside them, alert but calm, ears twitching at every shift in the breeze. The journey ahead led toward Vermilion City, a place of engines and storms where sea met metal and light never truly dimmed. By midday, the landscape began to change. The soft earth gave way to packed dirt and gravel, and the air thickened with the scent of oil and salt. The sound of machinery drifted faintly through the wind. The rhythmic clatter of distant shipyards, the slow grinding of cranes moving across docks. The horizon shimmered faintly with metallic light. They reached the outskirts of Vermilion as the afternoon deepened. The city rose from the coast like a cluster of steel and glass, its towers gleaming even under a muted sky. It was not vast like Saffron or bright like Celadon, but alive in its own rhythm, a place built upon the pulse of labor, the harmony of sea and industry. The streets were wide and clean, lined with warehouses, cranes, and vessels resting in the harbor. The smell of the tide mixed with the sharp tang of metal, and the ground itself seemed to hum faintly with the energy of engines below. The trainer paused on a rise overlooking the docks, watching ships drift slowly into port, great vessels of iron and steam, their hulls cutting through the silver water like silent giants. Sailors moved methodically along the decks, their motions practiced and sure. Along the piers, Pokémon worked beside them, Machop lifting crates, Magnemite floating near magnetic pulleys, Tentacool gliding just below the surface of the bay. There was no disorder here, only rhythm. Everything in Vermilion moved with purpose, each sound and movement part of a greater whole. The Pokémon Center stood near the harbor, its glass facade reflecting the restless waves beyond. Inside, the air was cool and dry, filled with a faint electric hum. The trainer rested, letting the weight of the road ease from their body while the companion was tended to. Through the window, the light shifted from gray to pale gold as the sun broke briefly through the clouds, scattering reflections across the water outside. When they left again, the city had grown brighter, alive with the activity of evening. Street lamps flickered on one by one, their glow mirrored in the wet stone. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly, the promise of rain. The trainer followed the promise. Sound, drawn toward the heart of the city, where power itself seemed to pulse in the air. The gym of Vermilion stood near the waterfront, half warehouse, half fortress, its walls lined with copper conduits that glowed faintly from within. The air around it crackled softly, filled with the scent of ozone. Inside, the light was dim but alive, the shadows sliced by sudden flashes of blue and white as electricity arced between metal rods suspended above the floor. The space was vast, almost cathedral-like, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. Machines lined the walls, turbines, coils, and panels humming in complex rhythm. The sound was not chaotic but precise, each pulse and spark timed like the beat of a great mechanical heart. The trainer stepped forward slowly, boots echoing faintly on the steel floor. The Pokémon companion followed, its reflection flickering across polished metal. Here, everything was charged. The air, the light, even thought itself. The gym's leader was said to be a master of both battle and current, a man whose discipline and precision matched the very forces he commanded. The trainer could feel his presence before seeing him, not as a figure, but as a field, a subtle distortion in the air, a quiet hum that seemed to vibrate through bone and breath alike. When at last he appeared, it was not with grandeur but with gravity. His steps were measured, his expression calm. Around him, the air shimmered faintly, alive with static. What followed was not a clash but a convergence, a meeting of two forms of focus, two different yet aligned intentions. The battle began without noise. Light flickered, and then the space filled with motion. Arcs of lightning, the hum of charge, the slow build and release of energy. The Pokémon companion moved swiftly across the metallic floor, its body outlined by brief flashes of light. Every impact echoed like distant thunder, every spark casting new shadows upon the walls. It was not violence, but precision, an exchange of discipline. The leader's Pokémon moved with machine-like rhythm, their attacks sharp and clean. The trainer countered with patience and flow, turning force into movement, grounding each surge rather than resisting it. It became a dance of energy, rising, falling, balancing. When the final pulse of light faded, silence returned, deep and resonant. The metallic hum of the room softened to a whisper. The leader's stance relaxed. His eyes, bright and thoughtful, softened with understanding. No words were needed. The acknowledgement hung in the air, silent and complete. The trainer stood still for a moment, feeling the faint vibration beneath their feet. The air was warmer now, charged but calm, the storm having spent itself. They bowed slightly, a gesture returned with equal respect. Then they turned and stepped back into the night. Outside, vermilion shimmered beneath the glow of countless lamps. Rain had begun to fall. Slow at first, then steady. Drops hissed softly as they met the warm pavement, releasing a faint mist that caught the light. The harbor reflected the city's glow in wavering lines of gold and silver. Ships swayed gently, their masts creaking in the wind. The trainer walked along the docks, coat drawn close against the rain. The Pokémon companion followed, fur dampened but unbothered, eyes bright with the reflected city lights. Together, they moved past rows of silent vessels until the noise of the gym was far behind. At the edge of the pier, they stopped. The sea stretched outward, dark and restless, its surface alive with rain. Lightning flashed somewhere far out over the water, a white vein across the sky. Thunder followed a moment later, low and rolling. The trainer watched the horizon, the pulse of stormlight reflecting faintly in their eyes. There was something comforting in the power of it, the reminder that energy in all its forms was simply motion-seeking balance. The same current that struck with fury was the one that warmed the earth, that powered light, that gave strength to the smallest spark of life. The lesson was the same as it had been in Cerulean, in Pewter, in the shadow of Mount Moon. Power meant nothing without control, and control was nothing without purpose. The Pokémon companion pressed close, fur bristling faintly with static. The trainer rested a hand upon its head, feeling the faint hum of energy still passing between them. Together they stood until the storm passed, until the lightning dimmed and the clouds began to thin. By the time dawn returned, the city had changed. The air was clear, washed clean by rain. The streets glistened in early light, and the harbor lay still, mirrors of silver reflecting the awakening sky. The people of Vermilion moved again through the docks, their motions calm, their voices low. The smell of salt and steel lingered, sharp but alive. The trainer walked once more to the edge of the harbor where the ships were moored in, long, straight lines. One stood apart, a great vessel with white sails and a hull of polished iron, its name painted in bold letters across the side. S.N. Even at rest, it seemed to hum with energy, its lights glowing softly beneath the morning sun. It was said that this ship sailed not only across seas, but between stories, carrying travelers, trainers, and dreamers alike to places both known and imagined. For many, it was a passage of luxury. For others, a bridge between stages of a journey. For the trainer, it would be a threshold, the next step beyond the comfort of familiar land. They stood watching it for a long time, the Pokémon companion seated beside them, The sound of gulls filled the air, the tide lapping gently against the pier. The ship's engines murmured faintly, a low and steady sound, like a heartbeat waiting to begin. When the call for boarding echoed across the harbor, the trainer lifted their pack and stepped forward. The ramp creaked beneath their cride. Boots, the scent of salt and oil rising stronger now. Behind them, vermilion gleamed in the morning sun, the city of thunder and steel, calm after the storm. Ahead, the open sea waited, vast and unending. The Pokémon companion turned its gaze back once, as if to remember the land. Then together they crossed the final step, and the sound of the sea grew louder, surrounding them once more in its ancient rhythm. As the ship pulled slowly from the dock, the wind shifted. Flags snapped softly, and the waves began to rise and fall with gentle insistence. The city grew smaller, its lights fading into the distance, replaced by the horizon's quiet line. The sky above was pale and clear. The trainer stood at the rail, eyes fixed upon the widening sea. Beneath them, the engines thrummed, deep, steady, alive. The journey was no longer one of roads and mountains, but of tides and skies. Yet the rhythm remained the same. The world moved, and they moved with it. And somewhere, beyond the edge of sight, the next story waited, carried on the whisper of wind and the unbroken pulse of the sea. The harbor of Vermilion faded into mist as the SS Anne slipped quietly from its berth. Ropes fell away, the last echoes of the dockhands' voices vanishing beneath the low hum of the ship's engines. Morning sunlight spread across the water in long ribbons of gold, and the air smelled of salt, oil, and beginnings. The trainers stood at the rail, watching the city shrink until it became a pale shimmer on the horizon. Beside them, the Pokémon companion leaned forward, ears twitching to every new sound that rose from the moving vessel. The deck thrummed beneath their feet. Each vibration carried the heartbeat of the ship, steady, confident, alive. Above, white sails and steel masts caught the breeze, while the cries of Wingull followed for a time, fading gradually into distance. The trainer breathed deeply, the cool air filling their chest. For the first time in many weeks, the world stretched in every direction without boundary. Passengers filled the decks, each moving with quiet wonder. Some leaned against rails, gazing at the open sea. Others strolled slowly, letting the rhythm of the waves lull them. Gentle music drifted from somewhere near the upper deck. A soft melody played on piano, mingling with the sound of gulls and wind. The trainer walked among them, not hurried, simply present, the companion close at their side. The sea was calm, its surface glassy and endless. Sunlight shimmered in ripples that seemed to pulse with their own inner life. Every so often, a school of Pokémon surfaced, Tentacool gliding just beneath the waterline, Horsey darting in silver arcs before vanishing again into the depths. Farther out, a Lapras moved with patient grace, its shell catching the light like a distant island. As the ship traveled farther from shore, Vermilion disappeared entirely. Only sea and sky remained, divided by a horizon so thin it seemed to breathe. The air grew cooler, the color of the water deepening from blue to indigo. Clouds gathered softly, above, long and low, the kind that promised rain, but not storms. The trainer wandered through the ship as the day unfolded. Corridors lined with polished wood and brass echoed faintly with footsteps. In quiet lounges, travelers read or spoke in low voices. Every space carried a sense of stillness, the hum of engines steady beneath it all, a reminder of motion even when nothing else seemed to move. They paused at the dining hall, where long windows framed the ocean's slow undulation. Silverware chimed softly, and conversation rose and fell like the tide. A sailor told stories of distant islands where storms glowed blue at night. A merchant spoke of rare stones found only in the deepest caves beneath the sea. The trainer listened without interrupting, their gaze drawn again and again to the windows, where waves folded gently upon themselves. Later, on the observation deck, the world seemed even larger. The horizon surrounded them in every direction, no land, no destination, only water reflecting the slow movement of clouds. The Pokémon companion pressed its paws against the railing, nose lifted to the wind. The smell of salt and rain was stronger now. The trainer rested a hand on its head, feeling the fur shift beneath the breeze. The afternoon passed slowly, marked only by the changing light. The sea darkened, and the air grew heavy with moisture. Somewhere below, the engines deepened in tone as the ship adjusted its course. Rain began as a whisper, fine droplets that turned the world to silver haze. Passengers moved indoors, their laughter fading down corridors, but the trainer remained on deck. The rain was cool against the skin, the sound of it soft and endless. The Pokémon companion shook its fur but stayed, eyes bright beneath the dim light. Together they watched the sea change color. Green, gray, then almost black. The surface textured by falling water. Lightning flickered far away, a single thread across the horizon, followed by a low, rolling echo of thunder. It was not a violent storm, only a reminder that even calm seas hold power beneath their surface. When the rain eased, the air smelled new, washed, clean. The clouds began to thin, and the sea reflected faint streaks of light from the setting sun. The trainer walked the length of the deck once more, the wooden boards slick beneath their boots. Lamps along the rail flickered on one by one, their glow catching in the mist. The ship moved forward steadily, cutting a smooth line through the gentle waves. Night arrived slowly. The sky cleared, revealing stars so bright they seemed near enough to touch. The moon hung low over the water, its reflection stretching in long silver trails that followed the ship. The sound of the engine softened until it became part of the sea's own rhythm. The trainer leaned against the railing, letting the cool wind brush across their face. The Pokémon companion lay nearby, eyes half closed, lulled by the motion of the ship. For a long time, there was no need for thought, only breathing, only being carried forward. In that silence, memories drifted up, like faint reflections on water. The forest of Iridian, the stone paths of Pewter, the cold breath of Mount Moon, the glow of Cerulean's rivers, the hum of Vermilion's machines. Each place had shaped something within them, left its imprint not in words or victories, but in the quiet moments between them, the pauses where understanding settled like dust. Somewhere deep within the ship, a bell sounded softly, the hour marked for rest. The trainer gathered their pack and moved toward the cabins. The corridors were dim now, lit only by small lanterns that swayed gently with the ship's motion. Doors closed one by one as passengers retired, and soon the only sounds were the muffled creak of wood and the steady heartbeat of the engines. Inside their cabin, the air was cool and faintly scented with salt. The trainer set their belongings aside and opened the small, round window that faced the sea. Outside, waves rose and fell in slow rhythm, illuminated by moonlight. The Pokémon companion settled near the bed, breathing softly. Sleep came easily, carried by the motion of the ship. In dreams, the trainer walked across an endless ocean of glass, their reflections stretching beneath their feet. The stars above pulsed in time with the sea below, and from somewhere distant came the low call of a lapras, long, haunting, and kind. Each step forward dissolved into ripples, and with each ripple came memory, drifting and fading like mist. When morning returned, it did so quietly. The light through the cabin window was pale and gentle, the color of dawn reflected through rain clouds. The ship had slowed, the hum of the engines lower now. Outside, the water glowed softly in shades of silver and blue. The air held the faint scent of land, green, earthy, distant, but growing stronger. The trainer stepped onto deck. The world beyond had changed again. The horizon was no longer empty. Faint outlines of cliffs and trees appeared, veiled in morning mist. The cries of seabirds echoed faintly over the waves, the first signs of life beyond the sea. The Pokémon companion stood beside them, eyes fixed ahead, tail stirring with quiet anticipation. The ship continued its slow, graceful approach toward the unseen shore. The wind shifted, carrying warmth now instead of salt. The trainer rested a hand on the rail, feeling the faint tremor of the vessel's motion as it turned toward the new coast. Behind them, the open sea stretched vast and endless, its surface shining beneath the early light. For a long moment, the trainer looked back. The path they had crossed seemed impossible now. Miles of shifting water, unseen depths, and unseen creatures moving in the dark. Yet it had carried them safely, as all things in motion tend to do when guided by patience rather than force. The faint outline of a harbor grew clearer. Towers of stone, the Lost of Tidenton, glint of sunlight on rooftops, the slow rise of smoke from morning fires. The SS Anne sounded its horn, a deep note that rolled across the water and echoed against the cliffs. The sound was both arrival and continuation. The trainer turned once more toward the approaching shore. The Pokémon companion pressed closer, and together they watched the land come into focus. Green hills, narrow roads, and the distant shimmer of another journey waiting to begin. The voyage had been peaceful, a space between destinations, a breath drawn between storms. Yet within its stillness lay something vast, the understanding that travel itself was never about where one arrived, but how one moved through the endless expanse of what connected all places. The ship glided forward, steady and sure. The sea behind rippled in long, fading waves that stretched toward the horizon, carrying with them the echo of every moment spent above them. As the first gulls circled overhead and the harbor bells began to ring, the trainer smiled faintly. The world awaited again, larger, brighter, and still filled with mystery. The wind shifted once more, bringing the scent of land. The journey flowed onward. The SS Anne slipped through morning mist toward a small island whose cliffs rose steeply from the sea. The waves here carried a deeper tone, rolling slow and deliberate, as though the ocean itself grew cautious. The trainer stood at the rail, watching pale foam curl against the rocks. Beside them, the Pokémon companion was still and alert, fur ruffled by the salt wind. As the ship drew nearer, the land resolved into detail. A narrow harbor, a scatter of huts near the waterline, and beyond them, a wall of forest that shimmered faintly with moisture. The cliffs behind the trees were veined with dark stone, and higher still, a tower of metal and glass caught the light like a single blade. It looked less like something built and more like something grown from the storm itself. The ship anchored in the quiet bay. The crew lowered a small boat, its wooden hull rocking gently in the tide. The trainer descended with measured steps, feeling the shift from steady deck to restless sea. Oars cut the water in slow rhythm. Each pull carried them closer to shore until the boat slid against the sand with a soft hiss. The beach was narrow and dark, scattered with driftwood and shells bleached by salt and time. The trainer stepped onto land and felt the ground give slightly beneath their boots. The air was warm but heavy, thick with the scent of approaching rain. No crowds greeted them here. No voices rose from the huts. The island's inhabitants watched quietly from doorways, eyes following but faces unreadable. It was not suspicion, merely the watchfulness of those who had learned to live in rhythm with something greater than themselves, the storm that slept above their heads. The trainer inclined their head in greeting and continued inland. The Pokémon companion trotted beside them, leaving small prints that the tide quickly erased. The path beyond the village wound upward into dense greenery, where the light dimmed and the air cooled. The sounds of the shore faded, replaced by the hush of leaves and the faint hum of unseen energy. This island, the trainer knew, was unlike the others of the Kanto Sea. It was spoken of as a place of balance, where wind and lightning met in endless conversation. Sailors called it the Island of Storms, and though many had passed near its cliffs, few had set foot upon its inner paths. The storms that formed here did not destroy, they renewed, drawing strength from the earth and releasing it back to the sky. The path grew steeper. Roots twisted across the soil like veins, and the smell of ozone thickened with each step. The Pokémon companion's fur bristled slightly, not in fear but in awareness. There was energy here, vast, steady, patient. It pulsed through the ground, in intervals that echoed the beat of distant thunder. After a long climb, the trees opened suddenly into a clearing. Before them rose the tower seen from the sea, a structure of metal interwoven with living stone, its surface damp from mist. Lightning rods extended from its crown, catching the light like slender spears. The air around it hummed softly, not with menace, but with potential. The trainer paused, listening. The wind shifted, and from within the tower came a low vibration that seemed neither mechanical nor natural, but something between. It resonated in the bones, gentle yet immense. The Pokémon companion stepped forward, ears pricked, gaze fixed on the entrance. They ascended the steps carved into stone. The door was heavy but unsealed, moving inward with a deep sigh. Inside, the light was dim and blue, filtering through narrow slits that faced the sea. The air smelled faintly of metal and rain. Lines of energy ran along the walls, thin, pulsing veins of light that traced patterns too complex to follow. The sound here was unlike anything outside. It was a hum that shifted with the breath, rising and falling in time with the heart. It seemed to recognize presence, to echo faintly with every movement. The trainer moved deeper, slow and steady. The Pokémon companion's footsteps made no sound on the smooth floor. At the tower's core, the air thickened. A column of faint light rose from the ground, stretching to the ceiling. Within it, shadows moved like clouds beneath glass. The trainer stopped at the edge of the glow. The energy was neither cold nor warm, but carried weight. The sensation of standing beside a force too vast to name. The air vibrated softly, and from that column came a pulse of light that illuminated the chamber. For a heartbeat, the shadow within took form, the sleek avian outline of something greater than mortal size, feathers edged in white fire, eyes bright as stars seen through storm cloud. The light dimmed again, leaving only echo. It was not a summons, nor a warning. It was recognition, a silent exchange between traveler and guardian. The storm that lived within the island had taken shape for a moment, not to test, but to acknowledge. The trainer bowed their heads slightly. The Pokémon companion lowering itself as if understanding without words. The energy subsided, the hum fading back into steady rhythm. The light dimmed until only faint blue lines remained along the walls. The trainer stood still, absorbing the silence that followed. It was not emptiness, but peace. The deep stillness after lightning, when air and earth realign. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. The first drops of rain struck the stone steps, darkening them one by one. The trainer turned and began the descent. By the time they reached the tree line, the rain had become steady, its sound surrounding them in a curtain of calm. The path downward seemed different now, less steep, more fluid, as though the island itself exhaled. The Pokémon companion moved lightly over wet ground, occasionally glancing upward toward flashes of light that rippled through the clouds. When they returned to the village, the world was awash in silver. Rain drummed. On rooftops, ran in narrow rivers through the sand. The villagers moved quietly, covering windows, securing nets, their motions practiced and serene. They nodded as the trainer passed, not in curiosity but in acknowledgement, as though they too had felt the island's pulse shift. The storm grew through the afternoon, not in violence but in grandeur. Wind swept through the palm trees, bending them in graceful arcs. Lightning flickered high above, illuminating the sea in brief glimpses of white. The trainer watched from the shelter of a wooden awning. The Pokémon companion pressed close beside them. Every flash revealed the same truth. Sea and sky were not separate, only different expressions of the same energy. The waves rose and fell with the thunder's rhythm, and each strike of lightning carried the same pattern seen in roots, branches, veins, the endless branching of motion-seeking form. The trainer closed their eyes, letting the storm's sound wash through them. Beneath the noise was a steady pulse, slow and grounding. It was the island itself, breathing. It reminded them that even in the heart of motion, there could be stillness, that balance was not found in silence, but in harmony between forces. When night came, the storm began to drift away, its energy dispersing across the sea. The clouds thinned, revealing stars faint behind vapor. The air cooled, carrying the smell of wet earth and clean salt. The villagers emerged again, quiet smiles on their faces as they reopened shutters and rekindled lanterns. The trainer walked to the edge of the beach, where the tide had risen high. Foam glowed faintly in moonlight, tracing luminous shapes along the shore. The Pokémon companion stepped into the shallow surf, the water rippling around its legs. The sea was calm again, breathing evenly. Above, faint arcs of lightning still danced far on the horizon, distant, beautiful, harmless. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the charged air, in the taste of rain on the wind, in the heartbeat that seemed to echo through every living thing. The trainer reached down, brushing their fingers through the cool water. The companion lifted its gaze toward the open sea, eyes following the last flashes of light fading into the distance. Together they stood until the sky cleared completely, until the island slept once more under calm stars. When morning arrived, the air was light and fresh. Mist rose from the forest, and the ocean stretched smooth as glass. The trainer prepared quietly, tightening straps, checking supplies. The villagers gathered to see them off, offering fruit, cloth, and gentle words. They spoke little, but the gratitude in their eyes was unmistakable, a shared understanding between those who had listened to the same storm. The small boat waited at the water's edge, rocking softly. The Pokémon companion leapt aboard first, its reflection rippling across the surface. The trainer followed, pushing gently away from shore. The tide caught them immediately, drawing the boat outward. From the cliffs above, the tower shimmered faintly, still catching the light of a distant sun. A final rumble of thunder rolled low across the sea, not threatening but affectionate, a farewell from the island's heart. The trainer smiled faintly, hand resting on the companion's head. The sea ahead was calm once more, the horizon open. The storm had taught its lesson and moved on, leaving clarity in its wake. The oars dipped into water again and again, each stroke a rhythm of departure. Behind them, the island receded into mist, its cliffs softening into gray. The tower's outline lingered a moment longer, then vanished completely. Only sea remained, deep, endless, waiting, and somewhere beyond its quiet surface lay the next land, the next test, the next reflection of balance between silence and surge. The morning sea stretched endless and pale, brushed by a faint veil of mist that blurred the horizon into light. The trainer's small vessel moved gently across the quiet surface, oars dipping in slow rhythm. The Pokémon companion sat at the bow, gaze fixed forward, ears twitching at the call of distant Wingull. Behind them, the Island of Storms was little more than a shadow on the water, its cliffs and towers softened by distance until they became one with the clouds above. The air was warm and dry. Each breath carried a faint scent of salt and heat, unlike the cool, charged atmosphere of the island they had left behind. The sky deepened from silver to a clean, sharp blue as the sun rose, and soon the mist dissolved entirely. The world around them grew bright and quiet. Hours passed in unbroken rhythm. The trainer rowed without urgency, letting the sea set their pace. The Pokémon companion rested, eyes half closed, lulled by the sound of water brushing against wood. In the that distance something began to appear. Not cliffs this time, but smoke, thin and dark, rising straight into the sky. The sea beneath them changed color as they drew closer, green fading into deep cobalt, then into shades of amber and red reflected from the air above. The temperature rose perceptibly, and the wind carried a faint metallic scent. It was not unpleasant, only unfamiliar. Soon, the island came into view. It was smaller than the one before, but stranger in form, a ring of black rocks surrounding a basin of red and gold. The ground seemed to breathe with heat. Streams of molten stone traced slow paths down from a central peak, their light flickering like the pulse of some ancient heart. Despite the fire, the sea around it remained calm, as though the water itself had accepted the island's restless nature. The boat reached shore with a soft scrape. The sand here was dark and fine, warm beneath the trainer's boots. Steam rose from cracks in the stone, and the air shimmered faintly. The Pokémon companion leapt lightly onto the beach, paws landing on the dry patches between streams of heat. Its eyes glowed faintly in reflection of the molten rivers that wound through the rocks ahead. The trainer moved slowly inland. Each step was measured, the path uncertain. The ground beneath was solid but alive, faint tremors rippling upward through the soles of their boots. The air hummed with hidden movement. This was a place still being shaped, a world in constant creation. The landscape unfolded in shades of red, orange, and black. Pools of lava glowed like living glass, casting rippling light upon the rocks. Between them, rare plants clung to cracks in the stone, small, resilient, their leaves gray-green and waxy. Above, the mountain's summit burned with steady brightness, not in fury, but in purpose. It was the island's heart, and its rhythm filled the air. The trainer paused at the edge of a wide basin. Steam drifted upward from fissures, veiling the view beyond. Beneath the haze, a lake shimmered, not of water, but of molten stone, its surface moving like thick light. The sound it made was low and continuous, a deep, slow murmur that vibrated in the chest more than the ears. The Pokémon companion stepped forward, but hesitated at the edge, sensing the danger beneath the beauty. The trainer rested a hand on its back, feeling the warmth that radiated even through its fur. Together they watched the surface ripple, patterns forming and dissolving as though the island were dreaming. There was no wind here, only heat rising in spirals. The trainer's thoughts quieted under its influence. Time seemed to stretch. The rhythm of their heartbeat aligned with the slow breath of the volcano. In that alignment came understanding that fire, like storm, was not chaos, but the necessary motion of renewal. It consumed so that creation could continue. The path upward was narrow, cut through jagged stone. As the trainer climbed, the air grew hotter, the rocks beneath their feet shifting from gray to black to red. Each step released the scent of minerals and ash. The Pokémon companion followed close, its movements careful but steady. At the mountain's midpoint, they entered a cavern where the air glowed faintly red. Walls of smooth basalt reflected the light of unseen flame. The trainer paused, letting their eyes adjust, feeling the pulse of heat that came from deep within the stone. The Pokémon companion exhaled softly, and steam rose in curls from its breath. At the center of the cavern, light gathered, not from any visible fire, but from a core of energy that shimmered above the ground. Within it, something moved, its form shifting between bird and flame, between matter and memory. For a moment, the air filled with the scent of smoke and rain together, paradoxical and pure. The trainer felt the presence before seeing it clearly, a vast, ancient consciousness that burned without consuming, that existed not as destruction, but as transformation. The firebird's wings unfolded within the light, their edges radiant but gentle. Each movement scattered embers that drifted through the air like falling stars. There were no words, no noise, only exchange. The trainer's breath slowed. Their thoughts quieted until only heartbeat and flame remained. The energy before them pulsed once, strong and warm, and for a moment the cavern became day. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the light dimmed again, returning to the soft red glow of molten stone. The Pokémon companion stood still beside the trainer, its eyes reflecting the afterglow. The air was warm but calm now, as though the island had exhaled. A faint breeze stirred for the first time, carrying with it a whisper of coolness, the breath of balance returning. They remained there for a time, in the silence that followed the fire's retreat. It was not emptiness, but fullness, the kind that comes after something immense has passed through and left the world subtly changed. When they stepped outside again, the sky had shifted. The sun was low, its light turning the horizon to gold. Smoke rose in slow columns from the mountain's crown, but it no longer seemed threatening. The island's pulse had steadied. The trainer descended the mountain at an even pace, every surface glowing faintly in the fading light. The Pokémon companion moved ahead, its shadow stretching long and dark against the red stone. The heat beneath their feet had lessened. The air now carried a dry, almost sweet scent, not of fire, but of earth, renewed. At the base of the mountain, the basin had cooled slightly. The molten lake was dimmer, its edges crusting into dark glass. In the quiet, a sound emerged, the faint trickle of new water descending from somewhere unseen, meeting the cooling stone and releasing steam that rose in soft white plumes. Life, in its first tentative motion, was already returning. The trainer crouched beside one of these streams, touching the damp stone. It was still warm, but not burning. The surface shone faintly under their fingers, reflecting both light and shadow. The Pokémon companion leaned close, sniffing the air, sensing change. They spent the night near the base of the mountain, where the air was gentle and the stars clear above the steam. The world glowed faintly around them, not bright, but alive, the earth still shifting and cooling. The trainer sat in stillness, watching the light move along the rocks like slow breath. The Pokémon companion lay nearby, eyes half closed, lulled by the heat. In the quiet, the trainer thought of the pattern that had begun to form across their journey. Stone and water, storm and fire. Each place, each trial, was not a test to pass, but a conversation with the world itself. Strength here was not conquest, but comprehension. The ability to move with, not against. When dawn returned, the island had cooled further. Ash drifted lightly on, the wind, soft as snow. The air smelled clean, the scent of renewal replacing that of smoke. From the cliffs, the trainer could see new growth already beginning, pale shoots pushing through the blackened ground. Life had been waiting, patient and sure. The sea beyond shimmered under the rising sun. It was time to move again. The trainer packed their gear, each motion slow and deliberate, respecting the silence of the place. The Pokémon companion stretched, shaking faint dust from its fur, ready once more. At the shoreline, the boat waited. The water here was warmer than before, the tide gentle. The trainer paused before stepping in, looking once more toward the mountain. A single plume of smoke rose still from its peak, not in anger, but as a quiet heartbeat. The memory of flame lingered not as fear, but as light. The oars touched water. The island receded behind them, shrinking with each stroke. Soon it was a dark line on the horizon, then only a shadow within the haze of morning. The sea around them was calm again, its surface smooth, the color deepening to blue. The trainer rested the oars and let the current carry them for a while. The Pokémon companion leaned over the side, watching the reflections of clouds drift by. Above, a few embers of sunrise still glowed where the sky met the sea, the last gift of the island of fire. They did not speak. The world moved quietly, the air warm and full. Ahead lay new water, new light, new land unseen. But for now, there was only peace, the kind born from understanding that creation and destruction were never opposites, only different notes in the same eternal rhythm. And so they drifted on, through calm seas and rising light, carried once again by the world's slow breath. The sea was calm, open, endless. For days, the trainer's small vessel drifted beneath skies of perfect blue. The heat of the Fire Island was now memory, softened into warmth that lingered in the air, but no longer burned. The waves moved in slow, patient rhythm, their crests whispering against the hull. The Pokémon companion sat near the stern, eyes half-lidded, tail moving lazily with each shift of water beneath them. No ships crossed their path. No other lights marked the horizon. Only sky, sea, and the steady pulse of motion carried them forward. Yet there was no loneliness in it, only the calm of distance, of quiet between one moment and the next. Sometimes, in the silence, echoes rose from beneath the water, low notes, deep and resonant, like voices of ancient beings still wandering the depths. The sound filled the air and passed through bone and breath before fading away. The trainer listened each time, feeling the weight of time beneath the surface, the slow and patient life of the ocean continuing unseen. On the third evening, the water changed color. It shifted from blue to a green so pale it seemed almost luminous. The sea grew shallow, the waves smaller, their rhythm softer. Beneath the boat, shapes began to appear, long ridges of coral, pale stone arches, and dark channels carved through sand. The air took on the scent of earth mixed with salt, and the faint outline of land shimmered ahead. The island that emerged was unlike any they had seen before. It was quiet, almost too quiet, its shoreline pale and smooth, as though untouched for centuries. Trees grew in thin clusters, their leaves silvery under the light. The sand glowed faintly even in shade, and pools of still water reflected the sky so clearly that it was difficult to tell where the world ended and its mirror began. The trainer stepped ashore. The Pokémon companion followed silently, paws sinking into the fine, cool sand. The air was heavy with the scent of rain that had not yet fallen, the promise of water waiting above. No birds called, no insects stirred. Even the sea seemed to whisper less here, as though sound itself had slowed. They began to walk inland. The path was gentle, winding between low dunes and clusters of stone. The earth was soft underfoot, pale and smooth like bone. Each step felt as though it sank slightly into memory. In the center of the island stood a formation of stone pillars, worn and half-buried, encircled by shallow pools that caught the light of the sun and scattered it across their surfaces. The reflections danced over the stone, giving the illusion of motion even in stillness. The trainer moved closer, tracing a hand along one of the pillars. Its surface was warm, not from heat, but from some inner energy, the lingering pulse of something long past. The Pokémon companion circled the pool, sniffing the air, then paused, eyes fixed on the mirrored water. Within that reflection, the world seemed deeper than it should have been. Shapes drifted there, outlines of trees not present, fragments of sky that did not match the one above. The reflection was not of the moment they lived in, but of another time entirely, layered beneath like a second world. The trainer knelt, watching. For an instant, their own reflection changed, not vanishing, but shifting slightly, as though they were being shown a version of themselves that once had been, or might one day be. The image was calm, almost serene, and carried the faintest smile, as if to reassure. Then, with the next ripple of wind, it was gone, leaving only the clear sky mirrored in the pool. They remained by the stones for a long time. The air around them vibrated softly, a sound more felt than heard. It was the hum of continuity, the sound of time moving not forward or backward, but in every direction at once. Here, the island seemed to exist beyond sequence. The past, present, and what was yet to come folded together in perfect balance. The Pokémon companion lay beside the largest pool, eyes half closed, occasionally raising its head as if sensing unseen motion. Its fur caught the light and shimmered faintly, the color shifting with each breath. As the day passed, the light began to change. The sun dipped lower, and the reflections in the pools grew more intense, their surfaces glowing with colors too subtle to name, hues that seemed to belong not to air or water, but to memory itself. The stones, too, began to pulse faintly, as though awakening. The trainer stood in the center of the ring and closed their eyes. The warmth beneath their feet deepened. The world around them fell into perfect stillness. Then came the sense of expansion, not movement, but awareness widening outward. Images flickered behind the eyelids. Forests, mountains, storms, flames, oceans. Each place they had passed, each moment of quiet, between challenge and peace. Within the sequence appeared figures of light, shapes of Pokémon that had guided and tested. Guardians of storm, water, and fire. Yet they did not appear as separate beings now, but as facets of one continuous motion. Their energies blended, weaving together like threads of color into a single pulse that resonated deep within the chest. The trainer exhaled slowly. The light swelled and then receded, not fading, but folding back into the air. When they opened their eyes, the world was the same, yet clearer, as if a veil had lifted. The pool still shimmered, the stones still glowed faintly, but now each reflected the same rhythm. Heartbeat, tide, breath, all one and the same. The Pokémon companion stirred, lifting its head. Its eyes met the trainer's, calm and certain. Between them passed the quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding that the journey, for all its distance, had never been about reaching a single place. It was the act of seeing, of listening, of aligning one's motion with that of the world. The light began to fade as evening descended. The air cooled, carrying the scent of salt and shadow. The pools dimmed, until only faint ripples of starlight moved across their surfaces. Above, the sky deepened into indigo, scattered with constellations that mirrored perfectly in the water below. The trainer built a small fire from driftwood found along the shore. Its flame burned low and steady, the light of a single point surrounded by endless reflection. The Pokémon companion lay nearby, its breathing soft and rhythmic. Together, they watched the stars appear one by one until the horizon disappeared, leaving only light and its echo. Sleep came easily. The sounds of the sea and the fire merged into one long breath. In dreams, the trainer stood again at the center of the stone ring. But this time, the pools stretched out endlessly, reflecting countless skies, countless versions of the same path. Each ripple carried an image of a journey, some known, some still waiting. All were connected, all returning to the same quiet center. When dawn came, it was soft and golden. Mist rose from the pools, catching the light and scattering it into countless beams. The stones gleamed faintly, their warmth now gentle, like the fading memory of a touch. The Pokémon companion yawned and stretched, the air around it shimmering faintly before settling. The trainer doused the embers of the fire and packed their gear. Before leaving, they stood once more before the pools. The reflections now showed only sky and clouds, the world as it was, simple and whole. They felt no need to look for deeper images. Understanding had settled quietly within them, needing no words. As they walked back toward the shore, the light shifted with each step, reflections flickering across the sand. The sound of the sea grew louder, steady, and familiar. The boat waited where it had been left, rocking gently in the tide. The trainer turned one last time. The island shimmered faintly under the morning sun, its stones gleaming like fragments of a forgotten dream. The air around it vibrated softly, as if the world itself whispered farewell. They pushed off from shore, the Pokémon companion steadying its stance as the boat caught the current. The sea beyond was calm and blue once more, but in its depths the trainer could still sense the quiet hum of time, the echo of all things past and all things yet to come, carried together in the movement of water. They did not look back again. The island remained in memory, as all places eventually do. Its reflections folded gently into the rhythm of the journey. The sea stretched ahead, vast and clear, its surface glowing with the first light of day. And beneath that light, the trainer and companion continued onward, guided not by map or destination, but by the quiet pulse of time itself, always moving, always returning, forever becoming. The sea, at last, began to give way to stone again. The horizon sharpened, colors deepening from endless blue into the distant outline of cliffs rising above the surf. For many days, the trainer and their companion had traveled in silence, carried by currents and wind that seemed to know the way better than any map could. The air grew cooler as they neared the land, touched by the crispness of mountain air that drifted far out over the water. As they approached, the land revealed itself not as an island, but a vast peninsula, its edges marked by steep cliffs that descended directly into the ocean. Above those cliffs, clouds gathered in slow, swirling formations, not storm clouds, but immense, luminous structures that shimmered with light. The sun hung behind them, turning their edges indigo and silver. It was a place where the sky itself seemed alive. The boat found a calm inlet, a narrow cove where the cliffs parted just enough to allow passage. The water here was dark and clear, reflecting the blue of the sky above. The trainer stepped ashore, boots pressing into smooth, flat stone. The Pokémon companion followed, its fur ruffling in the cool breeze. Ahead, a path of worn rock climbed upward. It wound through steep ridges covered in moss and sparse grass, leading toward the highlands that disappeared into mist. Each step brought a deeper quiet, the kind that was not absence of sound, but presence of space. The air grew thinner, cleaner, touched by the faint scent of pine and rain. As they ascended, the world around them opened. From high ledges, the trainer could see the entire sweep of ocean behind them, a vast mirror of light. The islands they had visited lay far beyond the horizon now, hidden by distance but still alive in memory. Each place, each element, storm, water, fire, reflection, had carried them here, shaping them in ways no single trial could have done. The path narrowed near the summit, curving along the edge of a deep gorge. Mist drifted upward from below, veiling the ground in shifting layers of blue and white. The wind here was strong, pressing against the body like a living force. The Pokémon companion moved closer, steady and sure-footed, its movements measured and calm. Together, they crossed the ridge until the trail widened again, leading to a plateau bathed in light. At its center stood a single monument, a stone arch weathered by age but still whole, carved from a single piece of mountain. Beyond it stretched open sky, not the soft blue of morning, but the deep indigo of dusk. Even though the sun still burned behind the clouds, the world here seemed suspended between day and night, between one breath and the next. The trainer paused before the arch. The air vibrated faintly, not with sound, but with energy, the quiet hum of life condensed into stillness. The Pokémon companion sat at their side, head tilted upward, ears twitching as if hearing something distant and vast. They stepped through the arch. For an instant, the world shifted. The sound of wind fell away, replaced by silence so profound it seemed to erase thought itself. The light changed, neither bright nor dim, but balanced, pure. The ground beneath their feet felt both solid and weightless. Before them stretched a great plain of stone and light, its surface smooth as glass. The horizon curved gently upward, meeting the sky in seamless union. Above, clouds drifted in long, slow spirals, their motion deliberate, endless. It was a space beyond time, a place where the boundaries of earth and sky dissolved. The trainer walked forward. Their steps made no sound. Each movement left faint traces of light that faded quickly into the ground. The Pokémon companion followed, silent and attentive. There was no sense of danger here, only vastness, the feeling of standing within the breath of the world itself. At the plain's center rose a column of light, tall and steady, glowing with a pale indigo hue. Its surface moved like liquid glass, reflecting fragments of sky, water, and flame. It pulsed gently, in rhythm with the trainer's heartbeat. They approached, slowly. As they neared, the air grew warmer, not from heat but from resonance, a subtle vibration that passed through the body and settled deep within. The light was not blinding, but soft, welcoming. The trainer stopped a few paces away and closed their eyes. Within that stillness, memories began to unfold, each step of the journey returning in silence. The first forest, the cave of stormlight, the island of fire, the pools of reflection, all appeared, layered atop one another, not as separate places, but as one continuous thread. The light pulsed once more, and the memory shifted from images into sensation, the feel of rain on skin, the warmth of volcanic stone, the salt of sea air, the coolness of mountain mist. They were not recollections, but presences, alive and immediate. The Pokémon companion sat beside them, fur glimmering faintly. Under the indigo glow, its gaze was fixed on the column, unafraid. In its eyes reflected not one light, but many, all the colors of their shared journey intertwined. Then came a moment of stillness so complete it seemed to erase time. Within that stillness, the light changed, deepening in color, growing denser until it formed shape. It was not a creature, not truly, but the echo of countless forms overlapping. Wings of light, eyes of flame, the flow of water, the solidity of earth, all elements intertwined, moving as one. The trainer felt no need to move or speak. The presence before them was not separate, not something to confront or command. It was recognition, the meeting of self and world, the reflection of what had always been within. The air vibrated softly. The ground beneath them pulsed once, gently. Then the light spread outward, touching both trainer and companion. It flowed over them like water, through them like air, warm and bright and calm. In that instant, every motion, every breath of their journey aligned. The storms they had endured, the fires they had faced, the mirrors they had looked into, each had been a fragment of this same light, preparing them for this moment of convergence. And then, as softly as it had gathered, the light receded. The plain returned to silence. The sky remained indigo, unbroken. The trainer opened their eyes. Nothing had visibly changed, yet everything felt lighter. The weight of distance, of uncertainty, had lifted. They stood still for a long time, breathing the cool air, feeling it move through their lungs with perfect balance. The Pokémon companion rose and brushed against their leg. Its eyes met theirs with quiet certainty. No triumph, no pride, only understanding. They turned together toward the archway once more. As they crossed back through it, the world shifted again, sound returning. The whisper of wind, the faint rustle of grass. The plateau was the same, yet the light upon it seemed clearer. The horizon stretched vast and endless, the sky deep and alive. They descended the mountain in silence. The air grew warmer as they moved downward, and the scent of the ocean returned. From the cliffs, the world below appeared limitless. Valleys of green, rivers of silver, the far-off shimmer of cities and forests that had awaited all along. At the final ridge, The trainer stopped and looked back one last time. The arch stood small against the sky, its outline glowing faintly in the indigo dusk. Beyond it, clouds drifted, slow and bright, like the memory of something eternal. The Pokémon companion stood beside them, its gaze steady. The journey was not over, not truly. The world stretched on in every direction, infinite paths waiting, but the weight of not knowing had turned into peace. As they descended toward the foothills, the first stars appeared above, their light soft and steady. The path was steep, but their pace was even, unhurried. Each step landed with quiet, confidence, grounded in everything that had come before. By the time they reached the lowlands, the night had deepened fully. The sky glowed in layers, indigo near the horizon, black above, threaded with silver. The sea shimmered faintly beyond the cliffs, reflecting the stars. The trainer made camp at the edge of a clearing. The Pokémon companion rested near the fire, its eyes reflecting the flame. Together they sat beneath the vast sky, watching constellations drift slowly overhead, the same ones that had guided sailors, travelers, and dreamers since the beginning of time. The fire crackled softly. The trainer's thoughts were still. The world around them breathed in unison, whined through grass, tied on stone, heartbeat in chest. Everything existed together, effortlessly, in balance. And when sleep came, it came like light, slow, steady, infinite. Dawn came without sound. The air carried the cool scent of dew and salt, the breath of two worlds, mountain and sea, meeting where the land fell softly into the ocean. The trainer woke slowly, the faint gold of sunrise filtering through mist. The Pokémon companion stirred nearby, stretching, the faint light catching in its fur, until it seemed to glow with the same warmth as the morning itself. They packed their things in silence. The fire had long gone out, leaving only a small circle of ash and stone. The trainer covered it with sand, smoothing the earth until no mark of their rest remained. When they lifted their head again, the horizon had turned fully to gold, the sun rising in calm, steady motion above the sea. The world felt immense and close all at once. The mountains behind stood quiet, their indigo crowns still veiled in thin clouds. The ocean ahead rippled with light. Somewhere beyond that line of brightness lay everything they had crossed: islands, storms, caverns, reflections. Each memory folded neatly into the rhythm of the tide. The trainer began to walk. The Pokémon companion trotted ahead, following the faint trail that wound through grass and stone toward the shore. Birds called faintly from the cliffs, their voices soft and low. The sound was familiar, comforting, the first sign that the journey's long solitude had returned them to a living world. When they reached the coast, the tide was out, leaving stretches of smooth sand and scattered tide pools that reflected the early sky. The water was cold against the boots, gentle and clear. Tiny shapes moved beneath the surface: shells, small fish, threads of seaweed drifting like strands of memory. The Pokémon companion watched them for a moment, then continued walking, leaving shallow footprints that the waves slowly filled. For a long time they followed the shore without speaking, without thought. The world around them was enough. The cliffs rose and fell. The sky shifted from gold to pale blue, and the wind carried the scent of salt and earth. Then, in the distance, something new appeared, not natural this time, but shaped by human hands. A structure, small against the expanse of sky, stood near the edge of a hill, overlooking the water. It was simple, weathered, built of wood and stone, its roof shaped like a shallow peak. Smoke drifted faintly from a chimney, dissolving into the morning light. The trainer paused, then began to climb the slope. The Pokémon companion followed, moving lightly over the grass. As they neared, the details came into focus: a small home, quiet and solitary, surrounded by low walls of stacked stone. Behind it, a garden stretched toward the sea, filled with herbs and flowering plants that swayed gently in the breeze. No one stood outside. Only the wind moved, brushing through leaves and tall grass. The place felt lived in, but not newly so, like something tended carefully over time, with attention but without urgency. The trainer stopped at the edge of the garden. A wooden bench sat beneath a tree heavy with blossoms. They lowered their pack and sat, resting their hands on their knees. The Pokémon companion curled beside them, eyes half closed, tail flicking in rhythm with the wind. The sea below shimmered endlessly, the sound of waves rising and falling in long breaths. In that quiet, the trainer's mind drifted, not to plans or memories, but to a space between them. The world no longer felt like a sequence of destinations, but a single continuous motion. The door of the house creaked faintly. The trainer turned, half expecting someone to appear, but no one came. Only the sound of the door settling back into place, as if moved by the wind. The moment passed easily, naturally, as though the island itself had acknowledged their arrival. They remained there through the morning. The sun climbed higher. The mist burned away, and the air grew warm. The Pokémon companion dozed, its breathing slow and even. The trainer watched the sea, eyes half-focused, thoughts dissolving into the rhythm of the waves. At midday, clouds began to gather along the horizon, small at first, then growing into long, soft trails of white that stretched across the sky. Shadows moved gently across the water. The wind shifted, carrying the faint cry of Wingull overhead. It was the same sound that had accompanied the very beginning of their journey, back when the road was unknown and the world seemed impossibly wide. The trainer smiled faintly. The motion of the sea matched the motion of the heart, steady, endless, always returning. As the day unfolded, the sense of stillness deepened. The light turned soft and diffused. The air cooled. The Pokémon companion woke, lifted its head, and looked toward the horizon, where the first stars began to appear in the fading light. The trainer rose, stepping forward to the edge of the hill. The sea stretched outward, vast and calm, the surface now silver under the sea purr, twilight. For a moment, they stood completely still, feeling the quiet power of that expanse. Not the thrill of exploration, but the peace of understanding. Every place they had been, every step and breath had led to this point, not an ending, but a realization. That the journey was not toward something distant, but through what was always present. The wind grew cooler. Night gathered slowly. The first full constellation rose above the sea, the familiar pattern of the northern sky that travelers had used to find their way for centuries. It shone faintly upon the water, mirrored perfectly in the still pools along the shore below. The trainer looked down at their reflection, the same and not the same. The months of travel showed in the set of the shoulders, the calm in the eyes. The reflection looked back, without mystery now, without distance. They turned to their companion. The Pokémon watched them silently, ears twitching in the breeze. Its gaze held something deep and steady, something that needed no speech. The bond between them had grown beyond words, shaped by every shared moment, by silence, by challenge, by peace. The trainer sat again upon the bench, and the Pokémon curled beside them. Together they watched as night deepened, the stars multiplying until the sky became an ocean of light. The waves below echoed that same pattern, countless reflections flickering and fading with each movement of the tide. Time drifted, unmeasured. The world breathed. The trainer's heartbeat slowed until it matched the rhythm of sea and sky. They thought then of the others who walked their own paths, other trainers, other wanderers, each moving through their own versions of this same story. The world was vast enough to hold all of it. The striving, the stillness, the endless circle of learning and return. And in that vastness, no journey was ever truly separate. Every step taken by one became part of the whole, a single rhythm connecting all who listened. deeply enough to hear it. The wind softened. The waves fell into longer, slower breaths. The night turned completely clear. The trainer closed their eyes. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the ocean and the warmth of the companion beside them. The living reminder that connection, once formed, never truly fades. The world waited, as it always did, endless, welcoming, alive. And in that waiting, there was peace.